Dust swirled across the trading post plaza, where Running Deer stood trembling, cradling his twin infants. Desperation etched deep lines on his weathered face. 3 days without food had driven him to the unthinkable auctioning his own flesh. And blood? The crowd of settlers and traders murmured as bids rose. A cavalry officer raised his hand. A merchant nodded, each bid pushing the price of 2 innocent souls higher. Then silence fell as Morning Star appeared, her medicine pouch hanging heavily at her side. The Apache healer who had lost her own child years before moved through the parting crowd with quiet dignity. She placed a string of shells before Running Deer's feet. Their eyes met his filled with shame, hers with resolve. Could an act born of such desperation somehow heal 2 broken spirits and unite a fractured people? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning Star cradled the twins against her chest, their tiny bodies wrapped in a warm blanket as she walked away from the trading post. The string of turquoise shells that had secured their future now hung around her neck, a reminder of the price paid not just in shells, but in pride. The infants barely stirred, their weakness evident in their shallow breathing. The 5-mile journey to her isolated homestead normally took less than 2 hours, but today she moved cautiously, stopping frequently to check on her precious cargo. As the sun climbed higher, she sought patches of shade beneath stunted junipers, moistening the infant's cracked lips with water from her gourd. "You will live," she whispered in Apache, her voice carrying the melody of a promise. "The ancestors watch over you now." When she crested the final ridge, the familiar sight of her stone and timber dwelling nestled against the red canyon wall brought relief. Smoke rose from the chimney. Her father was home. Tall Pine, now in his 70th winter, had been her only family since the cavalry raid 5 years ago that had taken everything else. Morning Star paused, allowing memory its moment. Her own son, barely 3 summers old, and her husband, Strong Bow, had been among those lost in the attack that decimated half their band. The survivors had scattered, many eventually settling near the trading post, where white settlers offered food in exchange for labor or crafts. She and her father had chosen isolation instead, keeping to the old ways in the canyon home where generations of medicine women had lived before her. Who comes with twice the burden they left with? Tall Pine's voice carried from the doorway. Despite his years, his eyes remained sharp. He leaned on a gnarled staff, his long white hair tied back with a leather thong. "I bring new life to our home," Morning Star answered, the traditional response when a child was born into the family. His eyes narrowed as she approached. "Those are Running Deer's twins. The ones he took to sell. They are ours now." She moved, past him into the coolness of the dwelling. "I need my medicine bundle." Inside, she gently laid the infants on her sleeping mat while she gathered what she needed. The familiar leather pouch contained the tools of her healing, small pouches of dried herbs, crystals, feathers, and bones passed down through generations of medicine women in her lineage. From a clay jar, she took a pinch of ground osha root and mixed it with water, making a thin paste. "The boy is weakest," she said, dabbing the mixture onto the infant's gums. "The girl has more fight." Tall Pine stood in the doorway, disapproval etched in the deep lines of his face. "The drought takes everyone to the edge of their strength. Running Deer has 3 other children and a wife weakened from birth. What will they eat tonight? He has shells now." Morning Star continued her ministrations, not looking up. "More than I should have given." And when word spreads that Morning Star now raises the children she purchased like a white trader, Tall Pine's voice softened with concern. "Some already whisper that you keep too much to the old ways. This will not help. Let them whisper." She unwrapped the infants fully, examining their tiny bodies with practiced hands. Both were severely undernourished, their skin loose where baby fat should have rounded their limbs. These little ones need milk. Prepare the ground seeds as grandmother taught us, with rabbit broth. While Tall Pine grudgingly moved to the cooking area, Morning Star sang softly to the twins, an ancient melody meant to welcome spirits into the world. Though they had been born nearly 2 weeks earlier, they had not yet been properly greeted in the Apache way. "You come at a difficult time, little ones," she murmured. "But perhaps you bring change with you." That first night was long. The infants woke hourly, accepting only small amounts of the thin broth mixture Morning Star had prepared. The boy's breathing worried her, too rapid, too shallow. She placed warming stones near him and burned sacred herbs, letting the smoke waft over the sleeping mats. By morning's first light, she saw improvement. The girl's eyes, when they opened, showed alertness despite her weakness. The boy had made it through the night, his breathing more regular. Tall Pine watched from his corner as she tended them. "What will you call them?" "They will have protection. Names for now, until they are stronger." Morning Star's hands moved methodically, checking, cleaning, feeding. The spirits must not be too interested in them yet. And Running Deer's wife? She has no say in their naming? Morning Star's hands paused briefly. Cloud Dancer has always respected the old ways. She will understand. Understanding and accepting are different seeds that grow different plants. Tall Pine observed, rising to his feet. "I will gather herbs today. The yucca root and juniper berries you need are running low." After he left, Morning Star took the twins outside, letting the morning sun touch their skin for the first time since they'd come to her. A gentle breeze carried the scent of sage from the canyon. In the distance, an eagle circled lazily on thermal currents. "Look," she whispered to the infants. "Eagle watches over you. A good sign." The girl's tiny fingers gripped Morning Star's. When she touched her palm, another good sign. The boy remained still, but his color had improved. By midday, a visitor arrived, White Feather, an elder who had once been Morning Star's teacher in the healing ways. The old woman said nothing as she approached, studying the scene before her. Morning Star, seated on a woven mat, with the twins beside her in the dappled shade of a cottonwood. "So it is true," White Feather finally said. "You have taken Running Deer's children." "I have saved them," Morning Star corrected. "They would not have survived another day." White Feather lowered herself to the mat with the careful movements of the very old. "Some say you have stolen what belongs to the mother. Some say many things when their bellies are empty and their minds are full of fear." Morning Star offered her teacher water from a clay cup. "You have come to see for yourself." The elder took the cup, drank, and set it aside. With gnarled fingers, she gently examined each infant, murmuring ancient words over them. Finally, she nodded. "The boy has a warrior's spirit, though it flickers like a flame in wind. The girl has her mother's strength. Will you help me make cradle boards for them?" "My hands remember how, but—" Morning Star did not finish. They both knew she had not completed the cradle board for her own son before his death. White Feather's eyes softened. "I will help. But know this, not everyone will see your action as kindness. Running Deer's pride is wounded. Some young men already talk of how you shamed him before the whites. His children live. Pride can heal when fed by that truth." But as White Feather helped her gather materials for the cradle boards, Morning Star wondered if she had considered all the consequences of her impulsive act. The twins represented more than just 2 lives saved. They were a statement about community responsibility, about the old ways when no Apache child would go hungry while others had food. That night, as she fashioned the first cradle board by firelight, Morning Star made a silent promise to the sleeping infants. "You will know both worlds, your birth family and mine. Somehow we will make this right." Tall Pine watched her work, his initial disapproval gradually softening. When the boy fussed weakly, it was his weathered hands that gently rocked him. Back to sleep. They need names, even temporary ones, he said. It is not good for spirits to wander without being called. Morning Star nodded. The boy will be Small Warrior. The girl, Strong Seed. Good names. Strong enough to protect, humble enough not to attract too much attention from the spirit world. Tall Pine touched each infant's forehead with a finger dipped in sacred pollen. Welcome, Small Warrior. Welcome, Strong Seed. May you grow strong under our protection. For the first time since bringing the twins home, Morningstar felt certainty settle over her decision like a warm blanket. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same determination that had led her to place her shells at Running Deer's feet. Outside, coyotes called to one another across the canyon, their voices echoing in the night air. Inside the snug dwelling, new life had found sanctuary. At least for now, Running Deer walked slowly from the trading post. The weight of the shells in his pouch, nothing compared to the heaviness in his chest. Behind him, whispers followed like shadows. Both Apache and white settlers had witnessed his desperation, his willingness to trade his own blood for food. Now, with each step toward home, shame burned deeper. The family's shelter stood in a small clearing near the dry creek bed where 20 Apache families had settled after being pushed from their traditional lands. Once, this creek had run clear and cold throughout the year. Now it held only memory of water, much like Running Deer held only memory of pride. He paused at the stone circle that marked their food cache, storage pit now empty save for a few. Withered roots and dried berries, the Cloud Dancer had been rationing for days. Running Deer knelt, placing his hand on the smooth stones. 5 seasons ago, this cache would have overflowed with dried meat, corn, beans, and wild harvests. The drought had changed everything, turning once fertile gathering grounds to dust, and driving game far into the mountains. When he finally approached their shelter, a simple structure of juniper poles, covered with hides and canvas traded from fars. Settlers Running Deer heard his oldest child's voice. Father returns. 7-year-old Swift Fox called out, his voice still carrying the bright energy of youth despite his hollow cheeks. Running Deer forced himself to straighten, to meet his son's eyes. The boy rushed forward, then stopped, looking past him. Where are the babies? Swift Fox asked, his dark eyes widening. Did they die? No. The single word felt torn from Running Deer's throat. They live. Then where? Go tell your mother I have returned, with food. Running Deer held up the sack of cornmeal, dried beans, and salt pork he had purchased immediately after the trade. Swift Fox hesitated only a moment before ducking back into the shelter. Running Deer heard him excitedly telling his 5-year-old, Sister Little Dove, about the food. Then came Cloud Dancer's question, soft but clear. And the twins? Running Deer entered the shelter, the dim interior a mercy that partially hid his face. Cloud Dancer lay on her sleeping mat, propped up on one elbow. 2 weeks after giving birth to the twins, her strength was returning slowly. Their daughter Little Dove pressed against her side, while Swift Fox hovered nearby, eyes fixed on the food sack. You have brought food, Cloud Dancer said, her voice carefully neutral. But not our children. Running Deer set the provisions down and knelt beside her. They will live. They will eat, as will we. Where are they? Her voice remained calm, but her fingers gripped the blanket. Morning Star has taken them. Cloud Dancers. Sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the shelter. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment and remained still. The healer? She bought our children? Cloud Dancer's control slipped, her voice rising. Like horses? Like blankets? She saved them, Running Deer countered, the words bitter in his mouth. What would you have me do? Watch them starve? Watch you all starve? I would have you be a father. Cloud Dancer struggled to sit up fully, her weakness momentarily forgotten in anger. A father protects. A father finds another way. There was no other way. Running Deer's voice broke. The hunting grounds are barren. The army blocks access to the canyon springs. Our people share what little they have, but it is not enough. Not for 2 more mouths that need milk when your body makes none. The brutal truth hung in the air between them. Cloud Dancer's milk had failed days after the twins' birth, her own body too depleted to sustain them. They had tried thin gruel, broth, everything they could think of, but the infants had grown weaker each day. Little Dove began to cry softly, pressing closer to her mother. Swift Fox stood rigid, his young face a mask of confusion and distress. "Children," Cloud Dancer said, her voice gentling, "take some cornmeal to Stone Walker's grandmother. Ask her to show you how to make the flat bread like before." After the children reluctantly left, carrying a small portion of the precious cornmeal, Cloud Dancer turned her gaze back to Running Deer. The fire of her initial anger had banked to smoldering coals. "Tell me everything," she said. Running Deer sank down beside her, suddenly exhausted. He described the auction, the faces of the whites, some sympathetic, others merely curious, a few contemptuous. He told her of the bids, of his fear that the cavalry officer or the merchant would take the twins far away, where they would never see them again. And finally, he spoke of Morning Star's arrival, her quiet dignity as she offered the shells. "She said nothing to shame me," he finished, though she had every right. Cloud Dancer was silent for long moments. Morning Star lost her own child in the raids, and her husband, yes. And she lives by the old ways in the canyon with her father, yes. Cloud Dancer's hands moved to her empty belly, a habitual gesture she had developed since the twins' birth. "Our children will be raised Apache then, not as whites. They will." Running Deer took her hand, relief flooding him at this first sign of acceptance, and they will have food, medicine, shelter. But not their mother. Cloud Dancer's voice caught. Not their father, not their brother and sister. Running Deer had no answer for this. The painful truth was that he had chosen the survival of his children over their place in their birth family. The shame of this necessity would live in him forever. "The others will talk," Cloud Dancer said after a while. "They will say Running Deer could not provide. They will say Cloud Dancer was too weak to feed her own babies. Let them talk. Our children live." But they both knew it would not be so simple. In Apache culture, one's standing in the community was essential. A man who could not provide, who had to sell his children to save them, such a man would be viewed with pity at best, contempt at worst. That evening, as Cloud Dancer prepared a simple meal from their new provisions, the shelter filled with the forgotten scent of cooking food. The children ate eagerly, their small bodies desperate for nourishment. Running Deer ate little, his appetite diminished by the day's events. After the meal, as darkness wrapped around their shelter, Swift Fox approached his father where he sat, at the entrance, staring out at the night sky. "Father," the boy said hesitantly, "will we see the babies again?" Running Deer drew his son close. "Yes, they are still your brother and sister. Morning Star is caring for them until ... double quotes, he faltered. Until when? Running Deer had no answer that wouldn't be a lie. He simply held his son, feeling the boy's thin shoulders beneath his arm. With the children asleep, Cloud Dancer spoke again, her voice low in the darkness. "I will go to see them when I am stronger. Morning Star may not allow it. She will. She knows the old ways. Children belong to the mother's family. She will respect this." Cloud Dancer's voice held a certainty Running Deer envied. "And when I am strong again, when the rains return, we will bring them home." Running Deer said nothing to this. The rains might not return for many months. By then, the twins would know Morning Star as their mother. The painful reality was that Cloud Dancer's hope might be just that hope, With little chance of fulfillment, in the days that followed, Running Deer found himself avoiding the communal areas where Apache families gathered. He hunted alone, pushing himself to range farther into the foothills where others didn't go. Twice he returned with small game, a rabbit, a few quail small victories that did little to restore his standing. Word had spread quickly through the community. Some offered sympathy, but others kept their distance, as if failure might be contagious. The young men who had once sought Running Deer's company on hunts now deferred to other leaders. Even Gray Wolf, the band's chief, had spoken to him only once, a brief acknowledgment that carried the weight of judgment. "You did what you thought necessary," Gray Wolf had said. "The Creator sees all hearts." The words, meant as comfort, only deepened Running Deer's shame. The Creator might see his heart, but what would he see there? A father who had failed in the most fundamental duty, to provide for his children. A week after the twins' departure, Running Deer made a decision. Before dawn, while Cloud Dancer and the children still slept, he gathered his few weapons, a knife, a bow that had belonged to his father, and arrows he had carefully crafted and saved for important hunts. He took only a small pouch of provisions. Leaving the rest for his family, he left a message with Stonewalker's grandmother, asking her to tell Cloud Dancer he had gone to the high country to hunt. What he didn't say was that he might not return unless he was successful. Better for his family to remember him as a man who tried than one who stayed to witness their continued suffering as the rising sun painted the eastern sky with pale light. Running Deer headed toward the mountains, the emptiness of the food cache a constant reminder of what drove him forward. Whatever it took, he would find a way to feed his family, to eventually reclaim his children, to restore his name among his people. Behind him, the settlement stirred to morning life, smoke rising from cooking fires where families gathered to share what little they had. Running Deer did not look back. His path lay ahead, uncertain but necessary, just as the twins' path now lay with Morning Star, a separate journey born of the same desperate hope for survival. 7 days had passed since Morning Star brought the twins to her canyon home. 7 days of constant vigilance, of measuring each swallow of thin broth, of counting each breath. The infants had survived the most dangerous period, but Morning Star knew the path to full health remained long and uncertain. Each morning began the same way. Before dawn, she rose to check the twins, her hands moving gently over their tiny bodies, assessing. She spoke to them constantly in Apache, telling them stories of the people, singing songs that had been passed down through generations of women in her family. "Your bodies remember these songs," she told them as she worked. "They were sung to your mother, and to her mother before her. The songs are in your blood." On this 7th morning, Morning Star noticed new strength in the girl's grip, a more focused gaze in her dark eyes. The boy, still weaker, had nonetheless begun to take more broth, his swallowing reflex growing stronger. Small victories that brought cautious hope. Outside, Morning Star heard Tall Pine speaking to someone, an unusual occurrence this early. She wrapped the twins in a soft rabbit-skin blanket and carried them to the doorway. Standing beside her father was Yellowbird, a young woman from the settlement who occasionally sought Morning Star's healing knowledge for her aging grandmother. "I bring a message," Yellowbird said, her eyes moving curiously to the bundle in Morning Star's arms. "Cloud Dancer asks after her children. She gains strength and wishes to know if they thrive." Morning Star nodded, unsurprised. "Tell her they grow stronger each day. The girl especially shows her mother's spirit." Yellowbird shifted uncomfortably. "There is more. Running Deer has gone to the high country to hunt. He left 7 days ago and has not returned." This news troubled Morning Star. The high country was dangerous this time of year, unpredictable weather, mountain lions, and the ever-present risk of encountering army patrols that would shoot an Apache man on sight, especially one hunting. in prohibited areas. Cloud Dancer must be worried, Morning Star said. She says nothing, but yes, we all worry, Yellowbird admitted. Some young men wanted to follow him, but Chief Gray Wolf forbade it. He said running deer must find his own path back to honor. Honor. The word hung in the air between them. Morning Star understood the complexity of what she had done saving the twins while simultaneously undermining running deer's standing as a provider and protector. The balance would need to be restored somehow. Tell Cloud Dancer I will bring the twins to the settlement when they are strong enough for the journey, Morning Star said. Perhaps in another 7 days. After Yellowbird left, Tall Pine regarded his daughter thoughtfully. You risk much by taking them back there so soon. Some will not welcome the reminder of what happened. They are not my children alone, Morning Star replied. They belong to many hearts. Throughout the day, Morning Star worked on a project she had been planning since the twins' arrival. Proper cradle boards that would keep them secure while allowing her to carry them or prop them upright. White Feather had helped her select the materials. Slender juniper branches for the frame, softened, deer hide for the backing, and rabbit fur for lining. Now, with the basic structure complete, Morning Star began the detailed work of decoration and finishing. Each cradle board would be unique, reflecting the spirit she sensed in each child. For the boy, she added small symbols of strength and healing, tiny paintings of bear tracks, lightning, and eagle feathers. For the girl, she incorporated patterns representing wisdom, growth, and the nurturing aspects of earth and water. As she worked, she sang the ancient creation songs, embedding the cradle. Boards with protection and purpose. Tall Pine occasionally joined her, adding his deep voice to the old melodies. His initial reluctance about the twins softening visibly with each passing day. They need proper names, he said as afternoon shadows lengthened across the canyon walls. Protection names are good for now, but they must have true names to grow into. When they are stronger, Morning Star agreed. When Cloud Dancer can be present, Tall Pine raised an eyebrow. You would include her in the naming? Of course. She gave them life. That connection cannot be severed, nor should it be. Later, as the twins napped in the afternoon warmth, Morning Star prepared a special mixture, a strengthening tea made from herbs she had gathered at dawn. The delicate process required precise amounts of each plant: echinacea for immune strength, fennel to aid digestion, a touch of chamomile for calm, and wild raspberry leaf to tone and heal. She was just straining the liquid when she heard the soft wail of the boy, followed quickly by the girl's stronger cry. Morning Star smiled, a good sign that they had energy to protest hunger or discomfort. She lifted them carefully, one in each arm, and settled by the cooking fire. Patience, little ones, your food comes. Using a small clay cup with a narrow spout that White Feather had brought designed specifically for feeding infants, Morning Star began the slow process of giving each twin the medicinal tea, a few drops at a time. The girl took to it easily, her small mouth working eagerly. The boy needed more coaxing, but eventually accepted the nourishment. Tomorrow we try goat's milk, Morning Star told them. Stone Walker has a nanny goat that just birthed kids. He has promised some milk in exchange for healing his mother's cough. As evening approached, Tall Pine prepared a small sacred fire outside their dwelling. When darkness fell completely, Morning Star brought the twins out, wrapped warmly against the desert night chill. This would be their first night blessing ceremony, an old tradition rarely practiced anymore by the Apache near the settlement. Tall Pine arranged 7 stones in a circle around the fire, each representing a direction or element important in Apache cosmology. Morning Star sat cross-legged before the fire, the twins cradled in her lap. Together, they sang the night blessing songs, asking the spirits to watch over the little ones, to guide their dreams, to strengthen their bodies. Firelight cast dancing shadows across the canyon wall behind them, creating the illusion of many people gathered around their small family circle. Morning Star felt the presence of ancestors, her own and those of the twins witnessing this moment, approving this unconventional family created by necessity and compassion. When the final song ended, Tall Pine spoke directly to the twins. "You come to us in a hard time, but perhaps that is as it should be. Strong spirits are forged in difficulty, like pottery in fire." He sprinkled a pinch of sacred cornmeal into the flames, which briefly flared blue-green. "May you grow to be bridges, not divisions." Morning Star was struck by her father's words. Bridges, not divisions. Perhaps that was the true purpose in all of this, not merely to save 2 lives, but to heal the fractures that drought and hardship had created in their community. The night ceremony completed, Morning Star carried the twins back inside and placed them in their newly finished cradle boards for the first time. They fit perfectly, the soft lining cushioning their still fragile bodies, while the firm backing provided the support they needed. "Tomorrow you will see the world from a new position," she told them as she secured the soft leather straps. Upright, like proper Apache children. That night, Morning Star dreamed of her lost son. In the dream, he was not 3 as when he died, but older, perhaps 7 or 8. He stood on a high ridge, looking down at her with a peaceful expression. Beside him stood 2 shadowy figures that Morning Star somehow knew were the twins, grown to childhood. Her son pointed to them, then to Morning Star, nodding as if in approval. When she woke before dawn, tears streaked her face, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The 8th day brought new developments. The boy took his first goat's milk feeding without difficulty, a significant milestone. The girl, not to be outdone, demonstrated remarkable alertness, her eyes tracking Morning Star's movements around the dwelling. "She sees well," Tall Pine noted with approval. "Strong eyes in one so young." Morning Star positioned the cradle boards near the doorway, allowing the infants to observe the daily activities while staying secure. She spoke to them constantly, explaining what she was doing as she ground herbs, prepared food, or sorted materials for basket making, a skill she practiced in the rare moments when both twins slept simultaneously. By midday, several visitors had arrived, an unusual occurrence that signaled growing interest in the twins. 2 elder women from a neighboring band brought small gifts, a tiny moccasin for each infant, expertly crafted from the softest deerskin, and a woven blanket sized perfectly for the cradle boards. "News travels on the wind," said Gray Willow, the older of the women. "We heard an Apache healer had saved children who might otherwise be lost." "They grow stronger each day," Morning Star acknowledged, allowing the women to inspect the twins with gentle hands. "The boy has Running Deer's brow," observed White Shell, the second visitor. "But the girl, she has her mother's determination in her gaze." The women stayed through the afternoon, sharing stories and knowledge, as was the custom when new life entered the community. They helped Morning Star prepare a special salve for the twins' skin, which had grown dry from their earlier malnutrition. The atmosphere was one of quiet celebration, a recognition that even in the hardest times, new life represented hope and continuity. As the visitors prepared to leave, Gray Willow took Morning Star aside. "There is talk in the larger camps," she said quietly. "The army sends more soldiers. They speak of gathering all Apache onto one reservation far from here." Morning Star absorbed this troubling news without visible reaction. "When?" "Nothing is certain, but preparations are wise." Gray Willow pressed a small leather pouch into Morning Star's hand. "Seeds from plants that grow quickly and can be hidden. Plant some near water sources where you walk." This gesture sharing precious seeds during a drought moved Morning Star deeply. It represented the old way, the community mind that thought beyond individual survival to the continuation of the people. After the visitors departed, Morning Star sat with the twins, in the late afternoon light, considering the days ahead. The cradle boards had transformed her ability to care for them, allowing her to wear one on her back while keeping the other nearby. Tomorrow, she decided, they would venture farther from the dwelling, beginning to strengthen in the fresh air and sunshine. "You have brought people together already," she told the drowsy infants. "Perhaps that is your gift to us." That evening, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Morning Star showed the twins the night heavens, pointing out the constellations as named by the Apache. "There is First Man," she said, indicating a pattern of stars. "And there, Great Mountain Spirit. They watch over us, as they watched over your ancestors and mine." Tall Pine joined them, adding his own stories of the sky beings. For a brief time, the hardships of drought and hunger receded, replaced by the timeless connection between generations sharing wisdom beneath an eternal sky. The twins, secure in their cradle boards, gazed upward with new eyes, beginning their journey into the world that would shape them, a world both harsh and beautiful, fragmented yet still bound together by threads of compassion and ancient knowledge that even the worst drought could not completely sever. Chief Gray Wolf had called a council meeting. Such gatherings had once been common, but the drought and subsequent scattering of the Apache bands had made them rare occasions. Word spread quickly. Through the settlement and outlying dwellings, all adults were expected to attend. The subject, though not explicitly stated, was understood by all: Morning Star's acquisition of running, Deer's twins, and what it meant for tribal customs. The council circle had been prepared near the dry creek bed, central to the settlement. Stones marked the perimeter, with a larger flat stone at the northern point, where the tribal talking stick would rest when not in use. By midday, people began to gather, finding places according to family groups and clan affiliations. Morning Star arrived with Tall Pine, the twins secured in their cradle boards, one carried on her back, one in her arms. Their presence caused a ripple of murmurs to pass through the assembled Apache. Some faces showed approval, others displeasure, but most reflected the complex mix of emotions that the situation had generated. Cloud Dancer sat with the remaining children among her birth clan. Her face remained carefully neutral as Morning Star approached, though her eyes fixed intently on the twins. She appeared stronger than reports had suggested, her posture straight despite the ordeal her body had endured. "They have grown," she said simply when Morning Star stopped before her. "Yes, the girl has your strength." Morning Star turned slightly, allowing Cloud Dancer a better view of the infant secured to her back. "Would you like to hold them?" A flicker of surprise crossed Cloud Dancer's face, quickly replaced by yearning. She nodded, and Morning Star carefully transferred the girl's cradle board to Cloud Dancer's lap. The woman's hands moved instinctively to touch her daughter's face, tracing the now fuller cheeks and stronger brow. "You have made beautiful cradle boards," Cloud Dancer acknowledged, her fingers running along the detailed paintwork. "They needed to see the world upright, as Apache children should." Morning Star settled beside her with the boy's cradle board. "He takes more milk now, though he still requires herbal strengthening." The two women continued this quiet exchange, discussing the twins' progress and needs, while those around them watched with varying degrees of interest. This simple interaction, a birth mother and caretaker sharing information about children, seemed to release some of the tension in the gathering. Chief Gray and Wolf called for attention by raising the talking stick. A smooth length of lightning struck, pine adorned with eagle feathers and sacred stones. The murmurs faded to respectful silence. "We gather as one people, though drought has tested our unity," Gray Wolf began, his deep voice carrying easily across the circle. "The old ones taught that when difficulties arise, we must turn to our traditions for guidance. But what happens when our traditions themselves are tested by new circumstances?" He gestured toward Morning Star and Cloud Dancer with the twins. "Before us sits a question no elder has been asked to answer before. When a father offers his children for trade, to save them from starvation, and a healer from our own people offers payment, what is our way forward? Whose children are they now? What obligations remain? An elder named Black Horse spoke first after receiving the talking stick. In the old days, no Apache would have needed to trade children for food. We shared what we had. No child went hungry, while others ate. He looked pointedly around the circle. Perhaps the real question is why we have forgotten this most basic teaching. Several voices murmured agreement, but Swift Knife, a young warrior, called for the stick next. Running Deer showed weakness, he declared, his voice hard with judgment. A man provides for his family or dies trying. He does not sell his blood. Swift Knife turned toward Morning Star. And a woman does not shame a man by publicly displaying his failure. Morning Star should have brought food to Running Deer's family privately, not made a spectacle at the trading post. I was not there to shame anyone, Morning Star responded calmly. I came to trade for herbs and saw children about to be lost. To us forever. It is true, added Yellow Bird, who had been present that day. The white cavalry officer was raising his bid. The twins would have gone to the fort or mission. Gray Wolf reclaimed the talking stick. Running Deer is not here to speak his mind. He hunts in the high country, seeking to provide for his remaining family. We will respect his absence. Stone Walker, an older hunter respected for his wisdom, requested the stick next. We face a larger question than just these two children. The whites push us into smaller territories each season. Game grows scarce. Our traditional gathering places are now fenced or guarded. How do we maintain our ways when the world that supported those ways is vanishing? This somber assessment brought thoughtful silence to the gathering. The twins, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, remained unusually quiet in their cradle boards. The children Lev, Whitefeather's aged voice broke the silence as she accepted the talking stick. In our oldest traditions, the clan mothers would decide such matters. The children belonged to the mother's clan, and decisions about their welfare would rest with the women of that clan. She looked directly at Cloud Dancer. What does the mother say? All eyes turned to Cloud Dancer, who straightened under the collective gaze. When she spoke, her voice was clear and surprisingly strong. I carried these children beneath my heart. I labored to bring them into this world. When my milk failed and their cries grew weaker, I felt a mother's deepest fear. She paused, looking down at the infant girl in her lap. Morning Star has given them life when death was certain. For this, I owe her a debt no mother can repay. Cloud Dancer looked up, meeting the eyes of those around the circle. But they remain of my blood, of my clan. I would not have them forget this. Morning Star nodded. Nor would I have them forget. They should know all who love them. Gray Wolf studied the two women thoughtfully. Perhaps there is wisdom in this shared care. The children connect our community rather than divide it. But Swift Knife was not satisfied. And what of Running Deer? What man wants his children raised by another while he still lives? This shames him. Already the young men speak differently of him. Shame comes from within. Tall Pine spoke for the first time, his aged voice commanding respect. Running Deer made a father's choice life for his children over pride. In the old days, this would be seen as wisdom, not weakness. The debate continued as the talking stick moved around the circle. Some argued for traditional maternal rights, suggesting the twins should return to Cloud Dancer immediately. Others acknowledged the practical reality. Without Morning Star's intervention and continued care, the infants likely wouldn't survive. Throughout the discussion, the twins remained the calm center of the storm. The girl watched the proceedings with alert eyes, while the boy dozed peacefully in his cradle board. Their very presence healthy, improving daily under Morning Star's care, was perhaps the strongest argument for the current arrangement. As The council extended into the afternoon. New concerns emerged. Stone Walker raised the issue of the increased military presence in the territory. Scouts report more soldiers at the fort, he said gravely. They bring papers and maps. This means only one thing: they prepare to move us again. Gray Wolf nodded. This is true. The agent has hinted at a new reservation far from here, where all Apache bands would be gathered. This news shifted the tenor of the discussion. Suddenly, the fate of 2 infants seemed less pressing than the potential fate of the entire tribe. If forced relocation came, decisions would need to be made about resistance or compliance, about preserving their way of life under even more difficult circumstances. Perhaps these twins have come at this time for a purpose, White Feather suggested, her weathered hands gripping the talking stick. They have already brought us together to discuss our traditions, our obligations to one another. Maybe they remind us of what truly matters as we face new threats. As the sun began its descent toward the western canyon walls, Gray Wolf called for a resolution. The Creator has given us minds to think and hearts to feel, he said. In this matter, both must guide us. After further discussion, a compromise emerged. The twins would remain primarily in Morningstar's care until they were fully strong, with regular visits to Cloud Dancer and their birth family. The arrangement would be reassessed when Running Deer returned from his hunting journey. Most importantly, the children would be recognized as belonging to both families, a bridge rather than a division. In times of great hardship, we must find new paths that honor old ways, Gray Wolf concluded. These children will know all who love them. They will carry the strength of many hearts. As the council dispersed, Morningstar approached Cloud Dancer once more. Will you name them? She asked. They have protection names now, but they should have true names from their birth mother. Cloud Dancer considered this, her hand still, resting on her daughter's cradle board. Not yet. Running Deer should be present for the naming, when he returns. The unspoken question, if he returns, hung between them, but neither woman gave it voice. Later, as Morningstar walked back toward her canyon home with Tall Pine and the twins, she reflected on the council's outcome. The compromise seemed wise, a balance of tradition and necessity. Yet she sensed that deeper currents remained, unresolved resentments that could resurface, especially among the young men who judged Running Deer harshly. You are troubled, Tall Pine observed as they walked. Swift. Knife and his friends see only weakness where there was courage, Morningstar replied. Such judgments can be dangerous. Young men often mistake hardness for strength, Tall Pine said. Life will teach them differently if they live long enough to learn. They walked in silence for a time, the only sounds the soft creaking of the cradle boards and their footsteps on the dusty path. The setting sun cast long shadows across the land, turning the red canyon walls to deep crimson. The soldiers come, Morningstar finally said, giving voice to her deeper concern. If they force our people to move, what becomes of our agreement? About the twins? What becomes of all of us? Tall Pine sighed heavily. One struggle at a time, daughter. Tonight, we feed and protect these little ones. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As they neared their dwelling, Morningstar spotted a figure waiting by the entrance, Lieutenant James Barrett from the cavalry outpost. Her steps faltered momentarily before she straightened her spine and continued forward. Whatever new complication this white soldier brought, she would face it with the same determination that had led her to place her shells at Running Deer's feet. Behind her, the settlement fell into evening routines, cooking fires being lit, children being called in from play, elders settling in doorways to catch the last warmth of the day. Despite the tensions revealed at the council, life continued its necessary rhythm. The twins, secure in their cradle boards, had already become part of that rhythm, a new heartbeat within the wounded but resilient body of the Apache people. Lieutenant James Barrett stood as Morningstar approached, removing his cavalry hat. In a gesture that seemed oddly formal, against the backdrop of the simple Apache dwelling. He was younger than most officers stationed at the fort, perhaps 30, with a scholar's thoughtful eyes that contrasted with his military bearing. Beside him stood a nervous-looking Apache man whom Morning Star recognized as Thomas, one of the settlement's residents who occasionally worked as a translator for the whites. "Evening, ma'am," Barrett said, his voice carrying the soft drawl of someone raised in the Eastern Territories. "I hope I'm not intruding." Morning Star regarded him silently, assessing the potential threat. Soldiers rarely brought good news to Apache doorsteps. Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Lieutenant Barrett wishes to speak with you about the children," he translated, though Morning Star understood English better than most realized, a fact she kept to herself for strategic reasons. "Why does a soldier concern himself with Apache children?" she asked in her own language, allowing Thomas to translate. Barrett shifted his weight, seeming genuinely uncomfortable. "May we sit? This is a delicate matter." Tall Pine had moved protectively closer to Morning Star and the twins. "We will speak outside," he said firmly, "not in our home." Barrett nodded in acceptance, and Morning Star directed them to a small clearing near the dwelling where several flat stones provided natural seating. She positioned herself so the twins' cradle boards were partially shielded from the officer's direct view. Once seated, Barrett produced a small notebook from his pocket, then seemed to think better of it and returned it unused. "I've been sent to investigate reports of child trafficking." Thomas hesitated before translating this term, finally settling on trading of children in Apache. Morning Star's expression remained impassive, though internally she felt a flicker of alarm. "There is no trafficking here. Apache children remain with Apache people." Barrett leaned forward slightly. "I understand you purchased these infants at the trading post 12 days ago. I offered fair trade for children who needed care." Morning Star responded. "Their father accepted. The tribal council has approved this arrangement." Barrett studied her face. "The Indian agent at the fort takes a different view. Under new territorial regulations, native children cannot be bought or sold, even among tribal members." This unexpected statement hung in the air between them. Thomas looked increasingly uncomfortable as he translated. "These are not your concerns," Tall Pine interjected sharply. "Apache matters are for Apache people." Barrett held up a placating hand. "I'm not here to take any action today. I'm gathering information." He hesitated and added, "Personally, I'd prefer to keep this matter away from the agency's attention. The alternatives would be ... unfortunate." Morning Star caught the veiled warning. "What alternatives?" "Mission schools, foster placement with Christian families. The agency believes orphaned or abandoned native children benefit from proper American upbringing." Morning Star felt cold. Anger rise within her. These children are neither orphaned nor abandoned. They have 2 mothers now, and a father who seeks to provide for them. 2 mothers? Barrett's eyebrows rose slightly. Morning Star explained the council's decision. How the twins would know both their birth family and their adoptive one. How they would grow with the wisdom and love of both households. As she spoke, the girl began to fuss in her cradle board. Without interrupting her explanation, Morning Star untied the leather straps and lifted the infant into her arms, soothing her with practiced ease while continuing her conversation with Barrett. The lieutenant watched this interaction with evident interest. "The children appear well cared for," he acknowledged. "Healthier than when I observed them at the trading post." This casual remark caught Morning Star's attention. "You were there?" Barrett nodded. "I was accompanying the quartermaster. I witnessed the ... transaction." "Then you saw children who would have died without intervention," Morning Star said directly. "Would your agency prefer dead Apache children to well cared for ones?" Barrett had the grace to look discomfited. "Of course not." He studied the infant in Morning Star's arms. "May I ask their names?" They have protection names only until they are stronger and their father returns. The girl is Strong Seed, the boy is Small Warrior. And the father Running Deer, he's not present? Morning Star exchanged a glance with Tall Pine before answering. He hunts in the high country. To provide for his family. Hunting in restricted areas? Barrett's tone sharpened, then softened again. Never mind. That's not why I'm here. An uncomfortable silence fell. Thomas shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly wishing to be elsewhere. The infant girl had quieted in Morning Star's arms, her dark eyes regarding the strange uniformed visitor with surprising intensity. You know our language, Barrett said suddenly, switching to Apache. His pronunciation was accented but understandable. You understand what I'm saying now? Morning Star allowed a flicker of surprise to cross her face before recovering her composure. Where did you learn Apache words, Lieutenant? University of Pennsylvania. I studied native languages before joining the Army. A wry smile touched his lips. My professors would be disappointed by how much I've forgotten. This unexpected revelation altered Morning Star's assessment of the officer. A man who had studied their language might have other knowledge, might see Apache people differently than most soldiers did. Why are you really here, Lieutenant? She asked directly, continuing in Apache rather than relying on Thomas's translation. Barrett hesitated, then dismissed Thomas with a nod. After the translator had moved out of earshot, he spoke in a lower voice, alternating between basic Apache and English. Captain Wilson, my commanding officer, received a report about the twins. He's under pressure from the agency to enforce new regulations about native children. Barrett glanced toward the settlement. Someone at the trading post filed a complaint. Who? A merchant named Dawson. Claims to be concerned about savage practices continuing among the Apache. Barrett's tone suggested his opinion of this concern. Morning Star knew Dawson, a trader who consistently offered the lowest prices for Apache crafts while charging the highest for basic supplies. His sudden interest in Apache welfare was suspicious at best. What does Captain Wilson intend to do? Tall Pine asked. For now, nothing. I convinced him to let me investigate first. Barrett looked directly at Morning Star. I told him the children were being well cared for by a respected tribal healer, that removing them would cause unnecessary hardship. And he accepted this? Temporarily. Barrett's expression grew more serious. But there's more happening than just this situation with the twins. The territorial governor is pushing for all remaining free bands of Apache to be placed on reservations by year's end. This confirmation of what they had already heard from tribal scouts sent a chill through Morning Star. And if we refuse? Those who resist will be classified as hostile. Military action would follow. Barrett spoke these words with evident discomfort. I don't agree with the policy, but I'm obligated to inform you. The boy began to fuss now, and Tall Pine carefully lifted him from his cradle board. The elderly man handled the infant with surprising gentleness, cradling him against his chest. Barrett watched this domestic scene with an unreadable expression. The twins would complicate any relocation. Infants often don't survive long journeys to distant reservations. We are aware, Morning Star said quietly. Why are you telling us this, Lieutenant? Why warn us? Barrett was silent for several moments, seeming to weigh his words carefully. My grandmother was Cherokee, he finally said. She walked the trail of tears as a child. Her stories, they stay with me. This unexpected personal revelation hung in the air between them. Morning Star studied the lieutenant's face, seeing the conflict there, a man caught between his duty and his conscience. What happens now? She asked. I'll report that the children are being properly cared for within tribal customs, that there's no cause for agency intervention. Barrett stood, putting his hat back on. But Dawson and others like him will continue to pressure the agency, and the reservation plans move forward regardless. As he prepared to leave, Barrett reached into his pocket and withdrew an official-looking paper folded into thirds. This came from the agency office. It outlines the regulations regarding native children and wardship procedures. He hesitated, then added, "It also includes the dates when agency representatives will visit settlements to assess compliance." He handed the document to Morning Star, who took it with outward calm, despite recognizing it for what it was, both a warning and an unexpected kindness from this complex man. "The agency representatives do not always follow their own schedules," Barrett said quietly. "Sometimes they arrive earlier than announced." The implication was clear. This document could give them time to prepare or to disappear if necessary. "Why help us, Lieutenant?" Tall Pine asked bluntly. Barrett looked toward the twins. "Children should remain with their people. History has taught us the cruelty of separation." He straightened his uniform jacket. "I should return to the fort before my absence is noted." As he turned to leave, Morning Star called after him, "Lieutenant Barrett." He paused, looking back. "Thank you for your honesty." He nodded once, then walked away, his tall figure soon disappearing around the canyon bend. When he was gone, Tall Pine let out a long breath. A soldier with a conscience. Rare as rain these days. Morning Star studied the document Barrett had, left, though she would need better light to read its contents fully. "He has given us valuable information, but also confirmed our greatest fears. The soldiers will come for all of us eventually. What will you do about the twins?" Morning Star looked down at the infant girl in her arms. "Keep them safe. Continue healing them, and prepare for whatever comes." That evening, after the twins had been fed and settled for the night, Morning Star examined the agency document by firelight. Its dense official language masked a brutal simplicity. Apache children deemed neglected or abandoned could be removed from tribal care and placed in government-approved settings, primarily mission schools or homes of white settlers willing to civilize them. The dates for inspection visits were listed by settlement area. The Apache community near the trading post was scheduled for assessment in 6 weeks. Morning Star shared this information with Tall Pine as they sat beside the dying fire. 6 weeks, she said. The twins should be strong enough by then to travel if needed. And Cloud Dancer? The agreement with the birth family? Tall Pine asked. "We must warn them too. Perhaps." Morning Star hesitated, then continued. "Perhaps the threat will help heal the divisions in our community. We all face the same danger." Later that night, after Tall Pine had retired to his sleeping area, Morning Star sat alone with the twins. The boy had begun running a slight fever, nothing dangerous yet, but concerning enough to keep her vigilant. She applied cool cloths to his forehead and chest, singing softly as she worked. Her mind kept returning to Lieutenant Barrett's visit and its implications. The immediate threat to the twins might be temporarily averted, but the larger danger to their entire way of life loomed closer than ever. And Barrett himself, was he truly an ally, or would his divided loyalties ultimately prove dangerous? As dawn approached, the boy's fever broke, his tiny body relaxing into deeper sleep. Morning Star finally allowed herself to rest, lying between the 2 cradle boards where she could respond instantly if either twin needed her. Her last thoughts before sleep claimed her were of running deer, somewhere in the high country, unaware of these new developments. She wondered if he had found game, if he would return in time to help face these challenges, if his pride could heal enough to allow him to work alongside her for the good of his children and their people. The agency document lay folded beside her sleeping mat, a paper weapon more dangerous than any cavalry saber. Its official words carried the power to destroy families, to sever the connections between generations, to erase the very identity of Apache children, like these twins who slept peacefully, unaware of the forces gathering around them. Morning Stars Hand reached out in sleep, resting protectively on the edge of the girl's cradle board. Whatever came next, she would fight with every skill and resource she possessed to keep these children with their people. They had already survived against impossible odds. Perhaps they would continue to defy expectation's tiny symbols of resistance and resilience in an increasingly hostile world. 7 days into his hunting expedition, Running Deer had yet to find game substantial enough to justify his journey. He had traveled farther into the mountains than any Apache had ventured in recent seasons, pushing beyond the unofficial boundaries established by cavalry patrols. The risk was enormous if captured hunting in prohibited areas. He would face imprisonment at best, execution at worst. Yet the alternative, returning empty-handed to witness his family's continued suffering, seemed the greater. Punishment. Each morning began the same way. Running Deer woke before dawn, consumed a meager portion of his dwindling provisions, then performed the hunter's prayer his father had taught him as a boy. He would close his eyes, feeling the earth beneath him, the air around him, centering himself in the present moment before asking the Creator and the animal spirits for guidance. "I seek life to preserve life," he whispered in the gray light of this 7th dawn. "Guide my path today." His father's bow lay across his knees, a weapon crafted from seasoned mesquite wood, its grip worn smooth by generations of hunters' hands. Running Deer had retrieved it from its hiding place before leaving the settlement, unwilling to trust this important journey to the less reliable trade rifles that many Apache now used. The bow represented connection to his ancestors, to a time when Apache men provided abundantly for their families. Its weight in his hands was both comfort and accusation. After his prayer, Running Deer moved silently through the forest, alert to every sound and sign. The higher elevation had brought him into pine forests where the drought's effects were less severe. Here, springs still flowed, plants still flourished, and animal tracks could occasionally be found in soft earth near water sources. By mid-morning, he had located promising deer tracks fresh enough to raise his hopes. He followed them carefully for nearly 2 hours, moving with the patience of a hunter who understood that haste meant empty stomachs. The tracks led him to a small meadow where the unmistakable signs of recent deer feeding could be seen in the cropped vegetation. Running Deer positioned himself downwind, selecting a natural blind formed by fallen pines. Here he would wait, however, long necessary. Time passed differently, for a hunter measured not in hours, but in heartbeats, in the quality of light shifting through branches, in the changing patterns of bird calls marking the day's progress. Near midday, his vigilance was rewarded. A young buck emerged cautiously at the meadow's edge, its head lifting frequently to test the air for danger. Running Deer remained absolutely motionless, controlling even his breathing as the deer moved gradually closer to his position. When the animal presented its broadside at 30 paces, Running Deer drew his bow in one smooth motion, a movement practiced thousands of times since childhood. The arrow flew true, striking behind the front shoulder. The deer bounded away, but Running Deer knew from its movement that the hit was fatal. He waited patiently, giving the animal time to lie down, for its spirit to depart. Following too quickly would only drive it farther in its death run, potentially losing the precious meat he had traveled so far to obtain. After sufficient time had passed, Running Deer followed the blood trail with meticulous care. He found the buck approximately 200 paces from where it had been struck, lying peacefully in a small clearing, as if it had simply lain down to rest. Running Deer approached with respect, kneeling beside the fallen deer. "Thank you, brother," he said softly in Apache, performing the traditional hunter's acknowledgement of the animal's sacrifice. "Your life will feed my children. Your spirit returns to the Creator." The work that followed was labor. Running Deer welcomed field dressing the deer, preparing the meat in strips that could be carried and preserved. Nothing would be wasted. The hide would become clothing or containers, The sinew would strengthen boughs and cradle boards. The bones would become tools. Even the antlers had purposes ranging from ceremonial to practical. As he worked, Running Deer felt something loosen in his chest, a tightness that had been his constant companion since the day he had stood in the trading post plaza with his twins in his arms. This successful hunt was a small step toward reclaiming his identity as provider, as father, as Apache man. By late afternoon, Running Deer had prepared most of the meat for transport, setting some strips on a smoking rack for his evening meal and the journey home. He would leave at first light tomorrow, the deer's offering carefully packed for his family and community. For the first time in many weeks, he would return with enough food to share beyond his immediate household, a significant step toward restoring his standing among his people. As twilight approached, Running Deer made his small camp more permanent, constructing a better shelter against the cooling mountain air. The smoke from his fire rose straight upward in the still evening air. A potential risk that he had calculated was worth taking given his remote location. The venison tasted better than any food Running Deer could remember, partly from genuine hunger, partly from the profound satisfaction of successful provision. As he ate, he allowed his thoughts to turn to his family for the first time that day. Cloud Dancer would be pleased with the meat, with the useful hide. Swift Fox and Little Dove would celebrate their father's return with tangible evidence of his hunting prowess. And the twins, what of them? Running Deer had forced thoughts of his youngest children from his mind during the hunt, knowing such distractions could be dangerous. Now, with food secured, he permitted himself to wonder how they fared with Morning Star, whether they had grown stronger, whether they somehow sensed their father's absence. The constellation the Apache called Hunter's Path was rising in the eastern sky when Running Deer heard something that froze him. Mid-movement, the distant but unmistakable sound of horses approaching. No Apache would travel mounted in these mountains. Only one possibility remained: cavalry patrol. Running Deer immediately doused his fire with handfuls of dirt, working quickly, but ensuring no embers remained to betray his position. He gathered only the most essential items: his bow, his knife, a small portion of the prepared meat, knowing he might need to abandon the rest of his hard-won harvest. Moving away from his camp in the deepening darkness, Running Deer found a vantage point that allowed him to observe the approaching riders. Within minutes, 5 mounted soldiers came into view, following the same game trail Running Deer had used days earlier. They moved with the confidence of men who expected no resistance, their voices carrying clearly in the night air. "Sergeant said there was smoke spotted from the south ridge," one soldier said. "Probably just an Apache poacher." "If we find him, we can add another to the count for this month," another replied with disturbing casualness. "Captain Wilson likes his numbers." Running Deer remained absolutely still as the patrol dismounted near his abandoned camp. The soldiers quickly discovered the smoking rack with its precious venison and the freshly butchered deer remains. "Still warm," the patrol leader noted, kneeling beside the extinguished fire. "He can't be far." Running Deer knew he faced a critical decision. The meat represented survival for his family, yet attempting to defend it against 5 armed soldiers would be suicide. More importantly, if he were killed or captured, Cloud Dancer and the children would have no provider at all. With silent reluctance, Running Deer began to withdraw, using every skill of stealth his father and grandfather had taught him. He would circle around, perhaps 50 paces, when disaster struck. An unseen branch snapped loudly beneath his foot, the sound seemingly amplified in the night stillness. "There!" a soldier shouted, and immediately lanterns were raised, rifles readied. Running Deer abandoned stealth for speed, moving rapidly through the forest he had studied carefully during daylight hours. Behind him, he heard the soldiers crashing through underbrush, their military discipline giving way to the excitement of pursuit. A rifle shot cracked through the night. the bullet splintering bark from a tree trunk inches from Running Deer's head. He changed direction, heading toward a ravine he had noted earlier, a place where a man on foot could go, where horses could not follow. The soldiers continued firing sporadically, more to maintain contact with their quarry than with any real hope of hitting a moving target in darkness. Running Deer reached the ravine and descended its steep side, using roots and rock outcroppings as handholds. At the bottom, a seasonal creek provided cover as he moved rapidly downstream, the water masking his tracks and scent. For nearly an hour, Running Deer continued this evasive pattern, moving through difficult terrain, doubling back, using watercourses to break his trail. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit faded entirely. The soldiers, unwilling to risk treacherous terrain in darkness, had abandoned the chase, at least until morning. Running Deer found temporary shelter in a small cave formed by tumbled boulders. Here he would rest briefly, gathering strength for the long journey ahead. He had lost most of his hard-won provisions, his carefully prepared deer meat now feeding soldiers instead of his children. The bow he had saved, along with his knife and a small portion of meat. But little else as he settled into the cramped space, exhaustion finally overtaking vigilance. Running Deer found himself thinking not of his narrow escape, but of Morning Star. What would she make of his situation? Would she see only failure in his return with so little to show for his dangerous journey? Or would she, perhaps, recognize the courage it had taken to venture alone into Forbidden's territory, to face both natural challenges and human enemies? These thoughts troubled his fitful sleep, mixing with dreams of the twins crying for food he could not provide. Once he woke suddenly, certain he had heard an infant's wail, only to realize it was merely wind keening through the rocks around his shelter. Morning brought both relief and new challenges. The soldiers would likely continue their search at daybreak, expanding outward from his abandoned camp. Running Deer needed to put substantial distance between himself and the patrol before full light revealed his trail. He began moving before dawn, working his way steadily eastward toward lower elevations, where pine forest gradually gave way to juniper and scrub. The terrain offered less cover here, but also fewer signs of his passage if he chose his path carefully. By mid-morning, Running Deer had descended to a ridgeline that provided his first distant view of the settlement area. From this height, the scattered Apache dwellings looked fragile and temporary against the vast landscape, a visual reminder of how precarious their situation had become. As he paused to rest and take bearings, an unexpected sight caught his attention. High overhead, an eagle circled in a clear blue sky. To most Apache, such a sighting would be considered significant, a message from the Creator or the ancestors. Running Deer watched the majestic bird's flight pattern, noting that it moved in the same direction he traveled, toward home. "Guide me," he whispered, unsure if he addressed the eagle, the Creator, or some deeper part of himself that still believed in signs and wonders despite recent hardships. The remainder of Running Deer's journey became a test of endurance. With minimal food and water, he pushed himself relentlessly, determined to reach the settlement before nightfall. His body, already lean from months of inadequate nutrition, began to protest the sustained effort, muscles cramping, vision occasionally blurring with fatigue. Yet something drove him forward, not just concern for his family's welfare, but a growing sense of purpose that had been absent during his earlier shame-filled days. This journey, despite its limited success, had rekindled something essential in him. He had faced danger alone, had made difficult decisions, had survived where many would have failed. The sun was low in the western sky when Running Deer finally approached the settlement's outskirts. He paused to compose himself, not wanting his exhaustion to be the first thing his family noticed. From a hidden spring known to local Apache, he drank deeply and washed the worst trail dust from his face and hands. As he neared the first dwellings, Running Deer became aware of unusual activity throughout the settlement. People moved with purpose between households, carrying bundles, engaged in animated discussions. Something had happened during his absence, something significant enough to disrupt normal routines. Stone Walker was the first to notice his return, the older hunter raising a hand in greeting. "Running Deer returns from the high country," he called out, drawing others' attention. Soon a small crowd had gathered, their expressions revealing a complex mix of emotions: relief at his safe return, curiosity about his journey, and something else, attention Running Deer couldn't immediately identify. "Where is Cloud Dancer? My children?" he asked, suddenly anxious. "They are well," Stone Walker assured him. "Your wife is with the healer women, learning to make the strengthening tea for when the twins visit." This casual mention of the twins and their visits momentarily confused Running Deer. Before he could ask for clarification, Chief Gray Wolf approached, his weathered face revealing genuine relief. "We feared for you," the chief said without preamble. "The soldiers have increased patrols in the high country. 3 hunters from Black Mountain Band were captured last week." Running Deer nodded grimly. "I encountered a patrol. They took most of my hunt, but I escaped with this." He indicated the small bundle of venison he had managed to save. "You found game?" Gray Wolf's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A young buck, healthy and fat, the first I've seen in many months." Running Deer felt a mixture of pride and frustration. As he described his successful hunt and subsequent loss, Gray Wolf clasped his shoulder. "You have proven your skills and your courage. The meat the soldiers took does not diminish this." These words from the respected leader eased something in Running Deer's heart, but questions remained. "What happens here?" he asked, gesturing toward the unusual activity throughout the settlement. "Why does everyone prepare as if for travel?" Gray Wolf's expression grew serious. "Much has occurred in your absence. The cavalry officer came with warnings. The agency plans to force all Apache onto the reservation by season's end." He paused, then added, "They have special interest in children not under proper care." Running Deer felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "My twins are safe for now." Morning Star received warning of inspection visits planned for 6 weeks from now. The council met again yesterday to discuss our options. Running Deer absorbed this information, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. And what was decided? Nothing final. Some argue for compliance to avoid military action. Others say we should scatter to the mountains where soldiers cannot easily follow. Gray Wolf studied Running Deer's face. "Morning Star has offered to bring the twins here tomorrow, so you may see how they thrive. She says they grow stronger each day." This unexpected consideration from the woman who had purchased his children left Running Deer momentarily speechless. During his journey, he had imagined confrontation upon his return, perhaps demands that he repay the shells to reclaim his children. Instead, it seemed Morning Star was reaching out, acknowledging his place as the twins' father Dot as twilight deepened around them. Running Deer finally made his way to his family's dwelling. Cloud Dancer stood in the entrance, their 2 older children, peering around her skirts. For a moment, husband and wife simply looked at each other. The distance between them, measured not just in physical separation, but in the shared trauma of the choices they had been forced to make. Then Cloud Dancer stepped forward, taking the bundle of precious meat from his hands. "You have returned safely," she said simply. "That is enough." Swift Fox broke the tension, rushing forward to examine his father's bow. "Did you see soldiers? Did you fight them?" Running Deer managed a tired smile, ruffling his son's hair. "I outsmarted them. That is better than fighting when you are one against many." As the family gathered inside their dwelling, Running Deer found himself surrounded by the simple comfort of familiar voices and movements. Little Dove pressed against his side, while Swift Fox demanded details of the hunt and escape. Cloud Dancer prepared the venison, stretching the small amount to feed them all. Only when the children finally slept did Cloud Dancer speak of the twins. "I have seen them twice now," she said quietly. "They grow stronger, the girl especially. Morning Star has made beautiful cradle boards for them." Running Deer nodded, uncertain how to respond to this information, this evidence of another woman caring capably for his children. "Tomorrow you will see them," Cloud Dancer continued. "You will see that we made the right choice, even though it was the hardest one." Running Deer lay back on his sleeping mat, exhaustion finally claiming him. His last conscious thought was of Eagles, the one he had seen guiding him home, and the feather decorations Morning Star had apparently added to his children's cradle. Boards, according to Cloud Dancer's description. Perhaps there was meaning in this connection, some message from the ancestors about the path forward through these dangerous times. Dawn broke with unusual clarity, the eastern sky painted in vivid strokes of orange and gold. Running Deer had risen before first light, his body still operating on the heightened awareness of the hunt despite his exhaustion. He stood outside his family's dwelling, watching the settlement gradually come to life as smoke began rising from cooking fires. Today he would see his twins for the first time since that desperate day at the trading post. The thought filled him with a complex mixture of emotions: anticipation, anxiety, lingering shame, and beneath it all, a father's simple yearning to hold his children. Cloud Dancer emerged from their shelter, her movements revealing her own nervous energy. "Morning Star will bring them at midday," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "White Feather has offered her dwelling for our meeting. It gives more privacy than here." Running Deer nodded, grateful for this consideration. The elderly healer's home stood slightly apart from other dwellings, offering protection from the settlement's increasingly curious eyes. As the morning progressed, Running Deer became aware of subtle dynamics within the community that had developed or deepened during his absence. People who had once been close friends now seemed divided into factions, their interactions marked by new tensions. Stone Walker explained the situation as they worked together repairing a broken axe handle. "The twins have become a symbol," the older man said. "Some see Morning Star's action as a return to the old ways, when the tribe cared for all its members. Others view it as interference with a father's authority. And what do you think?" Running Deer asked. Stone Walker considered the question carefully. "I think hungry children needed food, and a mother with empty arms needed purpose. The Creator works in ways we cannot always understand." This diplomatic answer reflected Stone Walker's character, always seeking balance, rarely taking sides in community conflicts. But others were less measured in their opinions. Near midday, as Running Deer helped distribute the small portions of meat he had managed to bring back, Swift Knife and several young men approached. Their body language communicated challenge even before they spoke. "The mighty hunter returns," Swift Knife said, his tone making the words an insult rather than praise. "With barely enough meat for his own family, let alone the community." Running Deer continued his work, acknowledging the barb with only a slight nod. "I found game where others said none remained. Next time, perhaps you will join me in the high country?" The subtle challenge silenced Swift Knife momentarily. Like most of the settlement's young men, he preferred to hunt in safer areas, even though game had grown scarce there. "We hear the medicine woman brings your children today," another young man said. "Will you reclaim them, now that you've proven you can hunt?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications about Running Deer's obligations and rights. Before he could formulate a response, Cloud Dancer appeared at his side. "Our children are not property to be claimed or discarded," she said firmly. "They are beings whose welfare matters more than pride or custom." Her unexpected intervention surprised the young men, who were unaccustomed to women entering such discussions. Cloud Dancer had always been respected for her quiet dignity, but this new assertiveness reflected the changes recent events had wrought in her. Swift Knife recovered quickly. And yet they were traded for shells, he said. If that is not treating them as property, what is? They were saved from death, Cloud Dancer replied evenly. Something you have never faced, young man who has never gone hungry. This direct challenge caused murmurs among those gathering to witness the confrontation. Swift Knife's family had indeed suffered less than most during the drought, thanks to his uncle's position as interpreter at the fort, which provided regular access to army rations. Before the situation could escalate further, White Feather appeared, her aged but commanding presence causing conversations to fall silent. Running Deer, Cloud Dancer, she said. Morning Star approaches with your little ones. Come now to my dwelling. The couple followed the elder healer, aware of the many eyes watching their departure. The community's interest in this reunion went beyond mere curiosity. It represented something larger about their collective identity and future. Feather's dwelling had been prepared for the occasion. Fresh cedar boughs covered the packed earth floor, their aromatic scent purifying the air. A small cooking fire burned at the center, with stones placed around it for seating. The elderly woman had clearly gone to considerable effort to create a dignified space for this important meeting. Sit, she instructed them. Center yourselves. This moment should not be clouded by others' opinions or your own fears. Running Deer and Cloud Dancer obeyed, sitting side by side on woven mats near the fire. They did not speak, but Cloud Dancer's hand found Running Deer's, their fingers intertwining in a gesture of solidarity they had not shared in many weeks. Minutes later, they heard voices outside, Morning Star's melodic tones, and Tall Pine's deeper responses. White Feather moved to the entrance and drew aside the covering, inviting them in with a formal gesture. Morning Star entered first, the girl's cradle board secured to her back. Tall Pine followed, carrying the boy. The sudden reality of seeing his children again, after believing he might have lost them, forever struck Running Deer with physical force. His breath caught, and beside him, Cloud Dancer made a small sound. That might have been a suppressed sob. Morning Star met their eyes calmly, without triumph or judgment. Your children have grown stronger, she said simply. They would know their father's voice. She turned, allowing Cloud Dancer to carefully remove the cradle board from her back. Meanwhile, Tall Pine handed the boy's carrier to Running Deer, who accepted it with hands that trembled slightly. The twins had indeed changed in the weeks since Running Deer had last held them. Their faces had filled out, losing the hollow, desperate look of starvation. Their eyes were brighter, more alert. The girl especially seemed transformed, her gaze fixing on Cloud Dancer's face with unmistakable interest. She recognizes you, Morning Star said softly. Children never forget their mother's face. Cloud Dancer traced gentle fingers over her daughter's cheek. She has grown so much. Running Deer found himself unable to speak as he looked down at his son. The boy's eyes were open, studying this new face above him with solemn curiosity. Carefully, Running Deer unstrapped the cradle board and lifted his son into his arms for the first time since that day at the trading post. The infant felt solid, substantial, in a way that he hadn't before. Running Deer could feel the difference in his son's body, the beginning of healthy baby fat, the stronger muscle tone, the more vigorous movement. You have worked miracles, he finally said to Morning Star, his voice rough with emotion. Not miracles, she corrected gently, just the old ways. Good food, proper care, songs and stories to nourish their spirits as well as their bodies. White Feather had withdrawn to give the family space, but now she returned with a pot of fragrant tea. Sit together, she instructed. Share food and drink as one circle. This is how healing begins. The next hour passed in a strange, tender communion. The two women, who each had claim to the twins, shared observations and insights about their development. Morning Star demonstrated techniques for feeding and soothing them. Cloud Dancer held each twin in turn, her face alight with rediscovered joy. Running Deer mostly listened, marveling at the ease that gradually developed between the two women. There was no competition in their interaction, only shared concern for the infant's welfare. Whatever private feelings of jealousy or resentment might exist, both women had set them aside for this meeting. As the afternoon progressed, Whitefeather raised the subject they had all been avoiding. The agency plans inspection soon. What? Will you tell them about these children? Morning Star looked to Running Deer and Cloud Dancer. We must present a united understanding. The white authorities will not comprehend our arrangement unless we explain it simply and consistently. What arrangement? Running Deer asked, realizing they had never explicitly discussed the long-term plan for the twins. The council agreed. They would remain primarily in my care until they are fully strong, Morning Star explained, with regular visits to you, their birth family. As they grow, they will know both households as home. Running Deer absorbed this information. During his absence, decisions had been made about his children's future necessary decisions, perhaps, but ones in which he had no voice. And if the soldiers come to take all Apache to the reservation, he asked, what then? A heavy silence fell over the gathering. This question touched on the larger threat facing their entire community, one for which no easy answer existed. We have 6 weeks before the agency inspections, Morning Star finally said. Perhaps by then we will see a clearer path. As the meeting concluded and preparations were made for the twins' return to Morning Star's canyon dwelling, Cloud Dancer drew Running Deer aside. They thrive with her, she said quietly. Better than they could with us, at least for now. Running Deer nodded, though the admission pained him. When I have hunted more successfully, when we have food enough, ... Cloud Dancer touched his arm. It is not just about food. Morning Star has knowledge we do not, healing ways, old songs, traditions our parents' generation began to lose. Perhaps our children are meant to learn these things from her. This perspective that the twins might gain something valuable beyond mere physical survival from their unusual situation was new to Running Deer. He watched as Morning Star secured the girl's cradle board to her back once more, her movements practiced and gentle. I will bring them again in 7 days, Morning Star told them. Sooner if you wish to visit our dwelling. After they departed, Running Deer and Cloud Dancer returned to their own home, where Swift Fox and Little Dove waited eagerly for news of their younger siblings. As Cloud Dancer described the twins' improved condition, their cradle boards, their increasing alertness, the older children listened with wide eyes. When will they come home to stay? Little Dove asked innocently. Neither parent had a simple answer for this question. Running Deer distracted the children with stories of his hunting journey, embellishing certain details for their entertainment while omitting the more dangerous aspects. Later, as evening settled over the community, Running Deer noticed increasing activity around the settlement, men gathering in small groups, discussions happening with unusual intensity. Stone walkers soon arrived at their dwelling, his expression troubled. There is to be a community feast tomorrow, he informed them. Chief Gray Wolf calls everyone to share what food remains, to discuss our future. What has happened? Running Deer asked, sensing there was more to this sudden gathering than Stone Walker had revealed. The older man glanced toward the children, then lowered his voice. Scouts returned from the north. 3 more Apache bands have been forced onto the reservation already. There are stories. He paused, clearly reluctant to continue. Stories of children taken, of families separated. This news sent a chill through Running Deer. The threats Lieutenant Barrett had mentioned were becoming reality elsewhere, moving closer to their own community, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. That night, sleep eluded Running Deer. He lay awake, revisiting the day's events in his mind, the weight of his son in his arms, the evident care Morning Star had provided, the looming threat to their entire way of life. For the first time, he found himself considering whether the unusual arrangement for the twins might actually be to their advantage in the dangerous times ahead. Morning arrived with a heaviness in the air that matched Running Deer's mood. Throughout the settlement, families prepared for the community feast, contributing what little they could spare. Some women ground the last of their corn into meal for bread. Men brought in small game rabbits, ground squirrels, whatever they had managed to hunt. Children gathered wood for the central cooking fires. Cloud Dancer prepared their own modest contribution thin soup made from the remaining venison, stretched with wild onions and the few edible plants she had gathered near the dry creek bed. The twins' situation had changed her in subtle ways. She moved with new purpose, spoke with greater confidence, as if their survival against impossible odds had awakened something dormant within her. By midday, the community had gathered in the central area. Food was pooled and distributed so that everyone received equal portions, though these remained meager by past standards. Chief Gray Wolf waited until all had been served before speaking. "We face difficult choices," he began without preamble. "The white government grows more determined to place all Apache on the reservation at San Carlos. Those who have already gone report poor conditions, bad water, insufficient food, diseases spreading among the crowded people." Murmurs passed through the gathering as Gray Wolf continued, outlining what the scouts had learned about the reservation system and the increasing military presence throughout Apache territory. "Some bands choose to flee to the mountains, to resist," he explained. "Others surrender, hoping to protect their children from warfare. We must decide our own path." Swift Knife rose immediately, several young men nodding in support. "We should fight," he declared. "Better to die free than live as prisoners." Several older men and women shook their heads at this, their expressions reflecting the wisdom of experience. Stone Walker spoke for many when he responded, brave words from one who has never seen his children starving. "Fighting means death. For the weakest among us first." The debate continued, growing more heated as various perspectives were voiced. Running Deer noticed that the community seemed to be dividing along generational lines, younger members advocating resistance, older ones cautioning against actions that would bring swift military retaliation. Morning Star had not attended the gathering, having returned to her canyon dwelling with the twins. Her absence was conspicuous, especially as discussion turned to the agency's particular interest in Apache children. "The agent tells our people at the fort that children will be taken for schooling to learn white ways," Thomas the interpreter explained reluctantly. "Some never return to their families." This information caused visible distress among parents of young children. Cloud Dancer's hand found Running Deer's again, their shared fear requiring no words. As the discussion grew more contentious, with community members taking increasingly polarized positions, a sudden commotion at the gathering's edge drew everyone's attention. 2 Apache scouts rushed into the circle, their expressions urgent. "Soldiers come," one announced breathlessly. "A full patrol moving this way from the fort." Immediate chaos erupted as parents gathered children, as belongings were hastily collected. Gray Wolf called repeatedly for calm, but the community's fear had overwhelmed any semblance of order. Running Deer pulled Cloud Dancer and their children close. "Go to our dwelling," he instructed. "Gather only what we cannot leave behind. I will find Stone Walker, learn the soldier's purpose." The settlement had transformed in moments from a place of communal discussion to one of barely controlled panic. The feast forgotten, people scattered to prepare for whatever might come: compliance, flight, or something in between. As Running Deer moved against the tide of frightened community members, he found himself thinking not of his immediate family, but of the twins with Morning Star in their canyon dwelling. Were they far enough from the main settlement to avoid notice? Should someone warn them of the approaching patrol? The feast that was meant to unify the community had instead become the backdrop for its potential dissolution. The split cedar tree at the edge of the gathering area, struck by lightning, the previous spring, and divided cleanly down its trunk, yet somehow still living, seemed a fitting symbol for their situation. Divided by circumstances and differing responses to threat, yet still connected by shared history and blood, the Apache community stood at a crossroads that would determine not just the twins' fate, but all of their futures. The cavalry patrol entered the settlement with the practiced efficiency of men who had performed similar operations many times before. 6 mounted soldiers flanked a wagon driven by a civilian in dusty formal wear. The Indian agent, recognizable by his distinctive hat and the leather portfolio he clutched like a shield. Behind them rode Lieutenant Barrett, his expression carefully neutral as he surveyed the scattered dwellings and frightened faces. Chief Gray Wolf, Stone Walker, and several elders moved forward to meet the patrol, while most of the community watched from a cautious distance. Running Deer positioned himself where he could hear the exchange without being prominently visible. His recent hunting journey in restricted territory made him potentially suspect in the soldiers' eyes. Agent Blackwood comes with information. "For your people," Lieutenant Barrett announced formally. "All are required to attend." The agent, a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually disapproving expression, consulted a pocket watch before addressing Gray Wolf. "Gather your people? I won't repeat myself." Gray Wolf maintained his dignity despite the disrespectful tone. "Many are already here. The others will come shortly." As word spread, the remaining Apache families emerged reluctantly from their dwellings, mothers holding children close, men positioning themselves protectively near their families. Running Deer found Cloud Dancer and their children, standing with them at the gathering's edge. "Where is Morning Star?" Cloud Dancer whispered, echoing Running Deer's own concern. "At her dwelling with the twins," he replied softly. "Perhaps it is better they remain away from this." Agent Blackwood waited with visible impatience until most of the community had assembled, then withdrew a large folded document from his portfolio. The map, when unfolded, showed territory familiar to every Apache present, their traditional lands, now marked with new boundaries and labels in English. By order of the territorial governor and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, all Apache in this region will relocate to the San Carlos Reservation within 30 days, Blackwood announced, pointing to a demarcated area on the map. Those who comply willingly will be provided transportation and basic provisions. Those who resist will be classified as hostile and dealt with accordingly. A ripple of distressed murmurs passed through the gathering. 30 days far sooner than the time frame Lieutenant Barrett had previously mentioned to Morning Star. "Gray." Wolf's voice remained steady as he responded. "This land has been Apache home since before your grandfather's grandfather was born. The treaty signed 5 summers ago promised we could remain here." Blackwood's expression didn't change. "New treaties supersede old ones. The reservation provides protection and civilization for your people, schools for your children, medical care, regular rations." "We have heard different stories from those already taken there," Stone Walker said. "Stories of sickness, of hunger, of families separated." "Exaggerations and superstition," Blackwood dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Progress requires adjustment. Those who cannot adjust simply perish. That is nature's way." The casual cruelty of this statement silenced even the most vocal community members. Running Deer noticed Lieutenant Barrett's slight grimace, quickly suppressed a small indication that perhaps not all representatives of the white government shared the agent's callous perspective. Blackwood continued, producing additional papers from his portfolio. "I am conducting a census today. All individuals must be registered name, age, family status. Children especially. This specific mention of children caused parents to pull their little ones closer. Running Deer felt Cloud Dancer tense beside him. Why this special interest? In our children? Gray Wolf asked directly. Blackwood adjusted his spectacles. Educational assessment. The government has established excellent boarding schools where native children learn English, Christianity, and useful trades. Selected children will have the opportunity to attend. Selected by whom? A mother called out, unable to contain her fear. By government representatives like myself, Blackwood replied with a thin smile, based on suitability and need. Orphans, obviously. Children from broken homes. Those whose parents cannot properly provide for them. The implications were unmistakable. The community's most vulnerable members, those already struggling under drought conditions, could lose their children under the guise of opportunity. Running Deer's mind went immediately to the twins. By Blackwood's criteria, they would be prime candidates for removal infants whose father had once been willing to trade them for food, now being raised by someone other than their birth mother. The arrangements that made sense within Apache culture would be incomprehensible or deliberately misinterpreted by authorities like Blackwood. As if reading his thoughts, Cloud Dancer whispered, "Someone must warn Morning Star. She cannot bring the twins to the settlement again until these people are gone." Gray Wolf was attempting to negotiate. "We need time to prepare. 30 days is not sufficient to—" "The time frame is not negotiable," Blackwood interrupted. "Now we will begin the census. Form lines by family group." The community complied, reluctantly, understanding that outright defiance would only bring immediate consequences. Running Deer noticed Lieutenant Barrett directing his soldiers to maintain positions around the settlement's perimeter, ensuring no one could leave UNOB SERVED as families lined up. Running Deer whispered to Cloud Dancer, "Take the children to our dwelling. I will speak with Stone Walker about warning Morning Star." Cloud Dancer nodded, gathering Swift Fox and Little Dove close. As she moved away, Running Deer approached Stone Walker, who stood slightly apart from the other elders. "Morning Star must be warned," Running Deer said quietly. "The twins would be taken immediately if discovered." Stone Walker nodded. "Yellowbird has already slipped away to carry the message. She knows the hidden path to the canyon." Running Deer felt momentary relief, then immediate concern for Yellowbird's safety. If caught leaving the settlement during the census, she could face severe punishment. As Agent Blackwood began his methodical documentation, questioning each family and making copious notes, Lieutenant Barrett circulated around the gathering. When he passed near Running Deer, he paused momentarily, speaking without making eye contact. "I gave as much warning as I could," Barrett said softly. Blackwood arrived unexpectedly from the territorial office. "He has specific instructions regarding children in unusual arrangements." Before Running Deer could respond, Barrett moved on, maintaining the appearance of simply monitoring the proceedings. This brief exchange confirmed Running Deer's worst fears. The twins were indeed specifically at risk, not just part of a general threat to all Apache children. When Running Deer's turn came for the census, Blackwood scrutinized him with particular interest. "Running Deer, yes, I've heard your name. You recently traded twin infants at the trading post, did you not?" The direct question, asked loudly enough for others to hear, seemed deliberately designed to cause maximum humiliation. Running Deer felt the familiar burn of shame rise in his chest, but forced himself to respond calmly. "My children were ill. A healer from our community took them to restore their health." "Sold them, according to my reports," Blackwood corrected, making a note in his ledger. "Where are these infants now?" "With the healer," Running Deer answered truthfully but vaguely. "Name of this healer?" Running Deer hesitated, unwilling to directly expose Morning Star. Stone Walker intervened smoothly. The children received traditional care from tribal elders, he said, as is our custom with sick infants. Blackwood appeared skeptical, but moved on to documenting the rest of Running Deer's family. Wife Cloud Dancer. Children Swift Fox, age 7. Little Dove, age 5. Twins unnamed, age approximately 1 month. He looked up. I will need to examine all children personally. My older children are resting in our dwelling, Running Deer said. The journey to the reservation concerns us. We heard many children sick and on the way. Bring them for examination, Blackwood insisted, and arrangements will be made to locate the twins. As Running Deer reluctantly went to fetch Swift Fox and Little Dove, he noticed Lieutenant Barrett speaking with Chief Gray Wolf, their conversation appearing more collegial than the agent's interactions. Barrett was showing Gray Wolf a different document, something not shared with the broader community. When Running Deer returned with his children, the census continued, with Blackwood examining each child with unsettling thoroughness, making notes about physical condition, apparent intelligence, and general health. The process felt less like documentation and more like assessment of livestock, a comparison that surely occurred to every parent present. By late afternoon, Blackwood had finished his census, though he appeared dissatisfied with the results. Several individuals are unaccounted for, he announced, including a healer named Morning Star and supposedly sick twin infants. Morning Star lives apart, Gray Wolf explained. She keeps to the old ways, in the canyon where our healers have always dwelled. Her exact location will be provided tomorrow, Blackwood stated rather than asked. I will require a guide to take me to this dwelling. The infants must be registered, and their condition assessed. With these ominous words, Blackwood packed away his ledger and papers. The soldiers mounted their horses, preparing to depart, but it was clear this was merely a temporary withdrawal. They would return, specifically seeking Morning Star and the twins. As the patrol left the settlement, an unnatural quiet settled over the community. No one spoke until the last soldier had disappeared from view. Then the clearing erupted in urgent conversations, fear and anger mingling as families processed what had just occurred. Gray Wolf called the elders to his dwelling for immediate counsel. Running Deer, though not typically included in such gatherings, was summoned because of his direct connection to the twin situation. Inside the chief's dwelling, the atmosphere was grim. White Feather, Stone Walker, and other respected elders sat in a tight circle, their faces reflecting the severity of their predicament. Lieutenant Barrett showed me this, Gray Wolf began without preamble, unfolding the document the officer had privately shared. It is the official reservation assignment. Map. Our people are to be divided among 3 different locations. This shocking news silenced even the most vocal elders. The Apache had assumed they would at least remain together if forced onto the reservation. The prospect of being separated from clan members, from extended family, represented a devastating blow to their cultural survival. Why would they separate us? Stone Walker finally asked. To break us, White Feather said simply. A tree can withstand wind when its roots grow together. Separate the roots, and each piece becomes vulnerable. Gray Wolf continued. Barrett believes Blackwood has specific orders regarding children under 5 years old. They are to be assessed for immediate placement in the eastern boarding schools, not kept with their families even temporarily on the reservation. Running Deer felt physically ill at this information. All young children? Or specific ones? Those deemed at risk or neglected, Gray Wolf replied. Barrett indicated the twins would qualify under their definitions, as would any child from families struggling with food shortages. The implications were clear. Many children in their community could be taken, not just the twins. The drought conditions that had pushed Running Deer to his desperate act at the trading post had affected nearly every family to some degree. What options remain to us? Stone Walker asked, giving voice to the question in everyone's mind. Gray Wolf looked around the circle, his weathered face grave. 3 paths lie before us. First, we comply, fully go to the reservation, surrender our children to their schools, and hope that someday they are returned to us. No one spoke in favor of this option. The stories from other bands about children sent to distant schools were too disturbing, the reports of deaths from disease and despair too numerous. Second, Grey Wolf continued, we fight. Some young men already speak of this. We have weapons, knowledge of the land. We could resist. Stone Walker shook his head. Against how many soldiers? With what cost to our old ones, our children? Fighting means many deaths. The third path, Grey Wolf said quietly, is to scatter. Small family groups moving into the deepest canyons, the highest mountains, places where soldiers and their horses cannot easily follow. We would live as our ancestors did, moving often, leaving no clear trails. This option, essentially becoming fugitives in their ancestral lands, seemed to find the most resonance among the gathered elders. Though fraught with hardship, it offered at least the possibility of keeping families intact, of preserving some semblance of their traditional life. What of Morning Star and the twins? Running Deer asked. Blackwood will not abandon his search. For them. Yellowbird has reached her by now, Stone Walker assured him. Morning Star knows the hidden ways better than any of us. She and your children will not be found unless she wishes it. As the council continued debating their limited options, Running Deer found himself thinking of the reservation map Grey Wolf had shown them, a document with its neat lines and boundaries, drawn by people who had never lived on this land, never understood its significance to those who had called it home for countless generations. One detail had caught his attention. The mapped boundaries included surveyed areas, but showed large blank spaces in the most rugged terrain. These unmapped regions, too difficult for government surveyors to access, might offer temporary sanctuary for small groups, determined to avoid the reservation. When Running Deer mentioned this observation, Grey Wolf nodded thoughtfully. The whites fear what they cannot map. Perhaps in this lies our best hope to become like ghosts in the blank spaces. By evening, when Running Deer returned to his family's dwelling, decisions had been made. The community would appear to comply with preparations for reservation relocation while secretly making ready for scattered flight into the backcountry. Families would gradually move essential possessions to hidden caches. Those with young children especially would prepare for immediate departure if Blackwood returned with soldiers to take the little ones. Cloud Dancer had heard rumors of the council's decisions by the time Running Deer arrived. We must be ready to leave at any moment, she said, already sorting their few possessions into piles essentials that could be quickly carried. Items that might be cached for later retrieval, things that would regrettably be abandoned. Swift. Fox listened wide-eyed to these preparations, old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, but young enough to find excitement in the prospect of secret journeys and hidden camps. Little Dove simply clung to her mother, sensing the adult's tension without comprehending its cause. What of the twins? Cloud Dancer asked when the children had finally fallen asleep. If we flee in different directions, how will we know they are safe? How will they know their family? Running Deer had been considering this same question throughout the council meeting. I will go to Morning Star's dwelling tomorrow, before Blackwood returns with his guide. I must see the twins once more, must speak with her about where safety might be found. Cloud Dancer nodded, her expression a mixture of concern and resignation. Tell her. She hesitated, then continued with determination. Tell her to keep them safe however she must. Tell her we trust her judgment, even if it means we cannot see them for many seasons. This painful acknowledgement that their children's survival might require extended separation from their birth parents revealed how completely circumstances had transformed Cloud Dancer. From initial resentment of Morning Star's intervention, she had moved to grateful collaboration. And now to the ultimate maternal sacrifice, prioritizing her children's safety above her own desire to be with them. As darkness settled over the troubled settlement, running deer stepped outside their dwelling, studying the night sky where the ancient patterns of stars continued their eternal movements, indifferent to human struggles below. The reservation map he had seen earlier returned to his thoughts, its presumptuous boundaries, its blank spaces where official knowledge ended. Perhaps there lay the answer, not just for the twins, but for all of them. To become unmappable, to exist in the spaces between the lines drawn by those who sought to contain and control them. Not just to survive, but to remain Apache in the deepest sense, connected to land and traditions the government men like Blackwood could never truly understand. Dawn had barely broken when Cloud Dancer made her decision. While Running Deer still slept, exhausted from the previous day's tensions, she slipped from their dwelling. Around her neck hung a simple beaded necklace, traditional mother's gift typically presented to a daughter upon her first childbirth. Cloud Dancer had received it from her own mother and had intended to give it to her daughter someday. Now it might serve a different purpose. "I am going to gather plants before the soldiers return," she told Stonewalker's wife, who was already awake. "Watch my sleeping children." The older woman nodded, understanding more than was said. Everyone in the settlement lived with the weight of unspoken plans and contingencies since Agent Blackwood's visit. Cloud Dancer moved swiftly along. The hidden trail Yellow Bird had used the day before. Her body, still recovering from childbirth, protested the exertion, but determination pushed her forward. She needed to see Morning Star and the twins before Running Deer's planned visit, needed to speak woman to woman, mother to mother, without male presence shaping their conversation. The canyon path grew steeper, rocky outcroppings requiring careful navigation. Cloud Dancer had not visited Morning Star's dwelling before, having only received the twins at White Feather's home during their arranged meetings. Yet something pulled her forward with certainty, a maternal instinct that transcended physical distance. When she finally approached the stone and timber dwelling nestled against the red canyon wall, Tall Pine was outside, gathering wood. He straightened at her appearance, surprise evident in his weathered face. "Cloud Dancer comes alone?" he asked, immediately looking past her, as if expecting others. "I must speak with Morning Star, about the twins, about what happens now." Tall Pine studied her briefly before nodding toward the dwelling. "She tends them inside." They were restless in the night, sensing change perhaps. Inside, Morning Star sat cross-legged on a woven mat, the twins before her on a soft rabbit-skin blanket. She was singing softly, an ancient melody meant to soothe infant spirits. She looked up at Cloud Dancer's entrance, but showed no surprise, as if she had been expecting this visit. "You have heard about the agent," Morning Star said simply. Cloud Dancer nodded, kneeling beside her children. The twins had indeed grown remarkably in Morning Star's care. The boy, though still smaller than his sister, had gained healthy weight. The girl watched her birth mother with alert, intelligent eyes. "They will take them to the white schools," Cloud Dancer said without preamble. "Children like these, born in hardship with unconventional care arrangements." The agent made his intentions clear. Morning Star continued her gentle rhythmic patting of the twins as she replied, "I know. Yellow Bird brought warning. We have prepared to leave if necessary. Where would you go? There are places known only to the women of my lineage. Caves high in the sacred mountains where ancient ones once dwelled. Places with hidden springs that never run dry." Cloud Dancer absorbed this information, her hand moving instinctively to the beaded necklace. "I came to tell you something. Something I could not say with Running Deer present." She drew a deep breath. "Take them far from here. Keep them until this danger passes, even if that means years." The weight of this request hung in the air between them. Cloud Dancer removed the necklace, holding it in trembling hands. This belongs to the mother of daughters in my family. I want you to have it, not because you replace me, but because you protect what I cannot." She placed the beaded treasure in Morning Star's hand. "When my daughter is old enough to understand, tell her it comes from her birth mother, who loved her enough to let her go." Morning Star's eyes filled with rare tears. "This is too precious. Nothing is too precious to ensure they live that." "They remain Apache," Cloud Dancer interrupted. "I was wrong to resent you. Now I see the Creator sent you to save not just their bodies, but their spirits." Morning Star clasped the necklace, then reached for Cloud Dancer's hand. In that moment, something profound passed between the women, a covenant beyond words, a shared commitment to the twins that transcended conventional understandings of motherhood. "They will know your name, your face, your love, Morning Star. Promised. Distance cannot sever such bonds." "Keep them Apache," Cloud Dancer whispered. "That is all I ask." The illness came without warning, sweeping through the settlement like an invisible enemy. First, 2 children from the southern dwellings developed high fevers and struggling breaths. By nightfall, 5 more had fallen ill, including Swift Fox. Running Deer found his son burning with fever, his small body shivering despite the warm evening. "It is the same sickness that took many during last year's forced march to the agency," Stone Walker said grimly, looking at the growing number of afflicted children. The white doctor called it pneumonia. Cloud Dancer had not yet returned from her unannounced journey, leaving Running Deer to tend their son alone. Little Dove watched fearfully from the corner as her father placed cool cloths on her brother's forehead, his efforts seeming to make little difference against the raging fever. White Feather moved from dwelling to dwelling, administering traditional remedies, but the elders whispered that stronger medicine was needed, the kind only Morning Star could provide. For generations, her maternal line had been keepers of the most sacred healing knowledge. "Someone must fetch the medicine woman," Gray Wolf finally declared, setting aside the community's complicated feelings about Morning Star. "This sickness moves too quickly to wait." Running Deer stood immediately. "I will go. My son suffers, and Morning Star already tends my youngest children." As he prepared to leave, Cloud Dancer returned, her face reflecting both resolution and exhaustion from her secret journey. When she saw Swift Fox's condition, her maternal focus immediately shifted to her present crisis. "Go quickly," she urged Running Deer. "Tell Morning Star that the spotted fever takes our son." Running Deer raced along the canyon path, reaching Morning Star's dwelling as dusk deepened. When he explained the situation, she acted without hesitation, gathering her medicine bundle and instructing Tall Pine to prepare the twins for travel. "The children must come," she explained, securing special protective herbs around each infant's cradle board. "This illness threatens all young ones. I must perform the full healing ceremony, which requires their presence." Within an hour, Morning Star had arrived at the settlement with the twins and her sacred medicines. The community's divisions seemed temporarily forgotten in the face of common threat. Even Swift Knife and his followers, who had been most critical of Morning Star's role with the twins, watched silently as she moved with authority into the central gathering area. "Build a medicine fire," she instructed. "Bring all who are ill here, and all children who remain well. This sickness attacks the young first, but can touch anyone." As the sacred fire took shape, Morning Star removed a special object from her. Medicine bundle and eagle feather bound with red cloth and small crystals. This powerful healing tool had been passed through generations of medicine women in her family, used only in the most serious healing ceremonies. "The sickness enters through the breath," she explained, examining Swift Fox and the other afflicted children. "We must call on eagle medicine to lift it away, to strengthen weak lungs." Through the night, Morning Star led the community in the ancient healing songs. Parents of sick children participated directly, while others formed protective circles around them. The twins, secure in their cradle boards positioned at key points in the ceremonial space, became integral to the ritual symbols of life, continuing despite hardship. By dawn, subtle improvements could be seen. Swift Fox's fever had broken, his breathing eased. Other children showed similar progress. The ceremony continued through the day. Morning Star, teaching the mothers specific herbal preparations while maintaining the sacred songs and movements. Running. Deer observed with growing admiration how Morning Star had transformed the health crisis into an opportunity for community healing that went beyond the physical illness. Former critics now worked alongside her supporters, passing medicines, tending the ceremonial fire, supporting exhausted parents. As the second night of healing approached, White Feather spoke what many were thinking. The illness threatens, but it also reminds us that we are one people. Perhaps the ancestors sent this challenge to reunite us before the greater trial ahead. Morning Star nodded, the eagle feather moving gracefully in her hand as she continued the healing motions. All medicine works on many levels. The body heals when the community remembers its strength. Midnight shadows concealed Lieutenant Barrett's approach as he made his way to Morning Star's dwelling 3 days after the healing ceremony. He came alone, without uniform, moving with the caution of a man who understood the consequences of his actions. Tall Pine spotted him first, silently alerting Morning Star, who was preparing the twins for sleep. "I come with urgent news," Barrett said quietly when they allowed him inside. His gaze lingered briefly on the twins in their cradle boards before he withdrew a small leather-bound book from inside his jacket, his personal journal. "Blackwood moves faster than expected. The relocation order has been accelerated." Morning. Star's expression remained composed, though her hand instinctively moved to protect the sleeping infants. "How soon?" 5 days, not 30 as officially stated. Barrett opened his journal, revealing pages of neat handwriting interspersed with official documents. "He's requested additional troops from Fort Apache. They arrive tomorrow to begin the roundup." "Why warn us?" Tall Pine asked, suspicion evident in his voice. "You wear the blue coat." Barrett's expression revealed internal conflict. "My grandmother was Cherokee," he said after a moment's hesitation. "She was 7 years old during their forced march west. Her stories—" He paused, visibly composing himself. "Some actions cannot be reconciled with conscience, regardless of uniform." Morning Star studied the lieutenant carefully. "There is more you haven't said." Barrett nodded grimly. "Blackwood has specific orders regarding children under 5. They're to be immediately separated for transport to the eastern boarding schools." He glanced toward the twins. He mentioned these two specifically. Someone at the trading post has been informing him regularly. The betrayal stung, though it wasn't entirely surprising. The trading post attracted both Apache and whites, creating opportunities for information to flow in multiple directions. "We suspected as much," Morning Star acknowledged. "But why would Blackwood take such interest in 2 infants?" "Examples," Barrett said bitterly. "The agency wants to demonstrate its authority by intervening in what they're calling child trafficking incidents. Your case has been documented as their prime example." The implications were clear. The twins represented more than just 2 Apache children to the agency. They were symbols in a larger campaign to assert control over indigenous family structures. Barrett continued, revealing the most disturbing information. "I've seen the transportation plans. Families will be deliberately separated during relocation. Men to one section of the reservation, women and older children to another, younger children removed entirely." "This is not relocation," Tall Pine said quietly. "This is destruction." Barrett didn't disagree. "I can delay the cavalry by 1 day with mechanical problems on the supply wagons. It's all I can offer without exposing myself." He hesitated, then added, "I could help you and the twins reach the border." Mexico is beyond Blackwood's jurisdiction. Morning Star shook her head. And abandon our people? No, but your warning gives U.S. precious time. As Barrett prepared to leave, Morning Star surprised him by asking, "Will you hold them?" "Just once, so you remember what this is truly about." Hesitantly, the lieutenant accepted one of the twins, the girl, into his arms. Her dark eyes opened, studying his face with solemn curiosity. No cry, no fear, just the profound gaze of new life confronting a world determined to reshape her existence. "What is her name?" Barrett asked softly. "She is called Strong Seed for protection," Morning Star replied. "Her true name awaits safer days." After Barrett departed, Morning Star and Tall Pine moved with practiced efficiency, gathering only essential items. The most critical was Morning Star's medicine bundle, containing generations of healing knowledge recorded on hide scrolls. "We leave before dawn," she decided. "The settlement must be warned, but we cannot risk the twins being there when Blackwood returns." As they prepared through the night, Morning Star considered the extraordinary revelation hidden within Barrett's warning. Running Deer, the man who had once been willing to trade his children for food, had apparently been providing information to the cavalry about Apache movements in exchange for guaranteed rations for his family. This devastating betrayal would fracture the fragile trust that had been rebuilding in the community. Yet Morning Star felt unexpected compassion. Running Deer's actions, however misguided, stemmed from the same desperate instinct that had led him to the trading post with his twins, the primal drive to ensure his family's survival. Dawn painted the canyon walls crimson as Morning Star approached the settlement, the twins secured safely with Tall Pine in a hidden cave. She carried only her medicine pouch and a woven belt of intricate beadwork, a tribal wampum belt showing the historical alliances between Apache bands, a reminder of strength through unity that had sustained their people through previous crises. Settlements stirred with early morning activity, families preparing for another day under the shadow of impending relocation. Morning Star moved directly to Chief Gray Wolf's dwelling, where she found the elders already gathered in urgent council. "Barrett came to me in the night," she announced without preamble. "The soldiers come tomorrow, not in 30 days as claimed. They plan to separate families, take all young children immediately to Eastern schools." The news spread quickly through the settlement, creating immediate panic that Gray Wolf and the elders struggled to contain. As families began frantically gathering belongings, deciding what to save and what to abandon, Morning Star sought out Running Deer's dwelling. She found him alone, Cloud Dancer having taken Swift Fox and Little Dove to collect water. His face registered surprise at her appearance, quickly followed by concern. "The twins, are they well?" he asked, searching behind her as if expecting to see them. "They are safe," Morning Star replied, studying his face. "For now. But Blackwood comes specifically for them. Someone at the trading post has been providing detailed information about their situation." Running Deer's expression remained carefully neutral, but Morning Star detected a flicker in his eyes' recognition, then fear. "Someone betrays us?" he asked, his voice slightly strained. Morning Star held his gaze steadily. "Lieutenant Barrett showed me his journal. It contains reports from an Apache informant, someone who exchanges information for guaranteed rations." The silence between them stretched taut as a bowstring. Around them, the settlement's growing chaos provided covering noise for this intensely private confrontation. "My family was starving," Running Deer finally said, his voice barely audible. "I told them about hunting grounds, about which families might resist relocation. Small things that seemed harmless." His shoulders sagged. "I never spoke of the twins until recently, when Blackwood questioned me directly during the census." "And yet he knows everything," Morning Star said. "Their condition, our care arrangements, even the protection names I gave them." Running Deer's face contorted with shame and defensive anger. What choice did I have? The drought continues. The hunting grounds are empty. My children needed food. So you traded information instead of trading the twins? Morning Star asked, her voice not accusatory, but seeking understanding. One form of survival currency exchanged for another? Before Running Deer could respond, Cloud Dancer returned with the children, stopping abruptly when she sensed the tension. Swift Fox, still weak from his recent illness, pressed against his mother's side. What happens? Cloud Dancer asked, looking between them. Morning Star made a swift decision. This family had suffered enough division. The soldiers come tomorrow, not in 30 days. We must prepare the community. Running Deer's eyes reflected gratitude for her discretion, but Cloud Dancer knew her husband too well. What aren't you saying? She demanded. Setting down her water container, got the truth, spilled out then Running Deer's desperate collaboration, Blackwood's specific interest in the twins, Barrett's warning about the accelerated timetable. As he confessed, community. Members gathered outside the dwelling, drawn by raised voices. Traitor! Swift Knife shouted when he understood what was being revealed. He sells our safety as easily as he sold his children. The crowd's anger surged, threatening to become violent until Morning Star stepped between them and Running Deer's. Family. She raised the wampum belt high, its patterns catching the morning light. Look at what our ancestors show us. She called. In times of greatest danger, they united. Different bands, different beliefs, coming together against common threats. She lowered the belt, her voice becoming more intimate though, still carrying to all present. Running Deer's actions came from the same fear that lives in all of us. Fear that our children will not survive these hard times. Gray Wolf pushed through the crowd, his authority creating immediate space. This is not the time for division, he stated firmly. The soldiers come tomorrow. We must decide now together how to respond. Cloud Dancer moved to stand beside. Her husband, her posture communicating her own conflicted emotions, but also her commitment to family unity. My husband has erred, she acknowledged, but he shall help make this right. She looked directly at Morning Star, beginning with ensuring the twins' safety. Running Deer, shame evident in every line of his body, nodded in agreement. Tell me what I must do. As dusk fell over the settlement, 20 Apache gathered in Gray Wolf's dwelling, hunched over an ancient hide map spread on the earthen floor, preserved through generations and rarely shown to outsiders. This sacred document showed hidden paths, water sources, and sheltered valleys unknown to white settlers or military scouts. Our ancestors created this map in the time of the Spanish, Gray Wolf explained, his finger tracing faded lines. It shows the secret ways paths that remain when all others are blocked. Running Deer knelt at the edge of the circle, his position reflecting his diminished standing after the mornings. Revelations. Yet his knowledge remained valuable. His hunting journeys had taken him to remote areas marked on the hide map, allowing him to report on current conditions. This valley still has water, he confirmed, indicating a remote location in the high country. Game returns there 2 deer, rabbits. Enough to sustain several families if hunted carefully. Morning Star studied the map intently, memorizing key features. She would travel separately with Tall Pine and the twins, taking a route specifically suited for those with infants to carry. The ancient people left cave dwellings here, she said, pointing to a series of dots along a canyon wall. My grandmother showed them to me as a child. They remain sound, with natural springs nearby. Cloud Dancer, who had demonstrated unexpected strength throughout the day's crisis, suggested practical preparations. We should cache supplies along the routes. Medicine, dried foods, extra blankets. Stonewalker nodded approval. Small groups should leave tonight, traveling different paths to avoid creating obvious trails. The oldest and youngest going first, those better able to travel quickly following later. The strategy took shape. The community would scatter into 5 separate groups, each heading to a different location shown on the ancient map. If pursued, each group would divide further, using techniques passed down through generations for evading enemies. What of those too ill or weak to travel? White Feather asked, giving voice to a difficult reality. Several elders and 2 children, still recovering from the recent illness, might not survive a hurried journey through rough terrain. After thoughtful discussion, a painful decision was reached. Gray Wolf and a small group of elders would remain, appearing to comply with relocation orders while secretly delaying the soldiers and providing misinformation about the others' direction of travel. A final service to our people, Gray Wolf said with dignity. We are too old to run far. Let our capture buy time for the young ones to reach safety. As the council concluded, Morning Star approached Running Deer and Cloud Dancer. The twins. Remain with Tall Pine in the hidden cave, she told them. We leave at first light. You should come with us. Running Deer shook his head. The soldiers know my face too well now. My presence would endanger you and the little ones. His expression reflected his internal struggle. I will better serve by helping create false trails, drawing the cavalry away from your true path. Cloud Dancer's face showed the anguish of impossible choices. Swift Fox and Little Dove will travel with Stone Walker's family, she said. They can move faster without me. She straightened her shoulders. I will go with Running Deer. Together we will lead the soldiers away from the children. This decision to separate from all 4 of their children to increase the little one's chances of escape revealed the depths of parental sacrifice the situation demanded. Morning Star felt a surge of respect for this couple, who had once surrendered their twins out of desperate necessity and now prepared to risk their lives to protect them. As the community dispersed to make final preparations, Running Deer caught Morning Star's arm. If we do not meet again, he said quietly, tell the twins that their father found his courage too late, but found it nonetheless. Morning Star clasped his hand firmly. We will meet again, and you will tell them yourself. Through the night, small groups slipped away from the settlement, taking only what they could carry, leaving behind homes, possessions, and the remains of a way of life that had sustained them for generations. The ancient map, carefully rewrapped in its protective covering, traveled with Stone Walker, its knowledge too precious to risk capture. By dawn, the settlement appeared nearly normal to casual observation. Cooking fires burned, children played outside dwellings, elders sat in customary places. But it was an elaborate performance, maintained by Gray Wolf and the remaining elders, to disguise the fact that over half the community had already vanished into the landscape that had sheltered their ancestors for centuries. Moonlight silvered the canyon walls as Morning Star led their small group through narrow passages barely wide enough for a person carrying a cradle board. Tall Pine followed, the boy secured to his back. Cloud Dancer had insisted on accompanying them for the first leg of the journey before she would split off with Running Deer to create diversionary trails. Morning Star had wrapped each twin in a special blanket adorned with star patterns. The Starlight Blanket, handed down through generations of her family. The ancient textile not only provided warmth, but was believed to offer spiritual protection during night journeys, making the children nearly invisible to malevolent forces. Stay close to the rock face, Morning Star whispered as they navigated a particularly treacherous section. The shadows hide our movement. 4 hours into their journey, they reached the designated splitting point, a formation of 3 balanced rocks marking a junction of hidden trails. Running Deer waited there, as planned, having scouted ahead to ensure the path was clear. Cavalry patrols are moving south of the settlement, he reported in hushed tones. They seem unaware of our departure so far. Cloud Dancer approached the cradle boards, touching each twin's face with gentle fingers. No words could adequately express the complexity of this moment. A mother once again entrusting her children to another's care, this time with full awareness of the choice and its necessity. "The stars watch over you," she finally whispered to the infants. Then, to Morning Star, "Follow the path of standing rocks until you reach the Three-Finger Canyon. The caves lie in the western wall, hidden by juniper growth." The women embraced. Briefly, their shared concern for the twins, having forged a bond that transcended conventional relationships. Running Deer stood awkwardly apart until Morning Star gestured him forward. "They carry your strength," she told him, allowing him a moment with each twin. It helped them survive when others would have perished. Running Deer touched his son's small hand, then his daughter's cheek. "When safer days come, I will find you," he promised. "Until then, grow strong." The parting was brief by necessity. Cloud Dancer and Running Deer headed northwest, intentionally leaving obvious tracks that would draw any pursuers. Away from Morning Star's more carefully concealed route to the east. As the night deepened, Morning Star led Tall Pine through increasingly difficult terrain. The twins, remarkably, remained quiet throughout the journey, as if sensing the need for silence. Only occasionally would one make a soft sound, quickly soothed by gentle patting and whispered songs. Near dawn, they reached a narrow stream, the first flowing water they had encountered in many miles. While Tall Pine refreshed their water containers, Morning Star checked the twins, changing the moss padding in their cradle boards and offering them thin goat's milk carried in specially treated skin pouches. "They travel well," Tall Pine observed, his initial reluctance about the infants long since transformed to genuine attachment. "Strong spirits in such small bodies." "Apache children have always been carried through hardship," Morning Star replied. "It is in their blood to endure." As gray light seeped into the canyon, they sought shelter for the daylight hours. Morning Star selected a shallow cave with a southern overhang that would shield them from view while allowing her to observe the path they had traveled. They had just settled into this temporary refuge when Morning Star detected movement far below the unmistakable dust pattern of horses moving rapidly. Cavalry scouts had found someone's trail. Tall Pine saw it too. "They follow Running Deer's path," he said after studying the distant riders. As intended, Morning Star felt both relief and concern. The diversion was working, but at what cost? To Cloud Dancer and Running Deer if they were captured? The penalty for renegade Apache evading relocation could be severe. While Tall Pine slept, Morning Star kept watch, the twins secured beside her. The girl's eyes opened occasionally, studying Morning Star's face with an intensity that seemed beyond her few weeks of life. "You see much, little one," Morning Star whispered. "Perhaps too much for one so young." By midday, no further patrols had appeared. The distant sounds of pursuit had faded, suggesting the cavalry had committed to the false trail. When the twins had been fed and settled for a longer sleep, Morning Star finally allowed herself to rest, one hand remaining protectively on each. Cradleboard, their journey would resume at dusk. Another night of careful progress toward the ancient cave dwellings that represented their best hope for sanctuary. Behind them, the settlement would now be under military control, their former homes occupied by soldiers searching for those who had fled. Morning Star's last thought before sleep claimed her was of Cloud Dancer and Running Deer, hoping their sacrifice had purchased not just the twins' safety, but redemption for a father who had finally found his courage in the most desperate of circumstances. Running Deer and Cloud Dancer moved with deliberate haste, leaving obvious signs of passage. A disturbed stone here, a broken branch there, crafting a trail any cavalry scout could follow. They carried little beyond water, basic provisions, and a small pouch, containing a special mixture of herbs, resins, and minerals that Morning Star had prepared for them before their separation. Medicine smoke, Cloud Dancer explained when Running Deer questioned the pouch's contents. When burned, it creates colored smoke that can be seen from great distances. Our people have used it for generations to communicate across canyons. They traveled northwest for nearly a day, deliberately circling toward areas Running Deer knew were frequently patrolled. Their strategy was dangerous, but clear to become visible enough to draw attention, then to separate, creating multiple trails that would divide and exhaust pursuit. Near midday, they heard the first sounds of approaching horses. Cloud Dancer quickly scaled a rocky outcropping, concealing herself among the boulders, while Running Deer continued forward, leaving prominent tracks. "Circle back when you can," she whispered before they separated. "Remember our meeting place." Running Deer nodded, squeezing her hand before moving into the open terrain. Within minutes, he spotted the Cavalry Patrol 5 mounted soldiers following his trail with the focused attention of experienced trackers. He allowed himself to be glimpsed briefly before disappearing into a ravine, ensuring they committed to his pursuit. The chase extended through the afternoon, Running Deer staying just far enough ahead to remain tantalizing prey while leading the soldiers deeper into increasingly difficult terrain where their horses became liabilities rather than advantages. Meanwhile, Cloud Dancer had doubled back along a dry stream, leaving minimal traces as she made her way toward a sacred cave where, according to their plan, she would light the first medicine smoke signal after sunset, a sign to any watching Apache that the diversion had succeeded. Running Deer's situation grew precarious as the day waned. The soldiers had dismounted to pursue him through a narrow canyon, their tracking skills proving more formidable than he had anticipated. When a rifle shot echoed off the canyon walls, splintering rock near his head, he realized the pursuit had shifted from capture to something more lethal. Making a swift decision, Running Deer scaled a nearly vertical cliff face using handholds known only to local Apache. From this vantage point, he could see the soldiers conferring below, clearly frustrated by his evasion. More importantly, he could see Cloud Dancer in the distance, a thin spiral of distinctive blue smoke rising from her position. The signal that confirmed she had reached safety and that Morning Star's group should now change direction to further confuse any additional pursuit. His mission half accomplished, Running Deer began his descent on the canyon's opposite side, planning to circle around toward their predetermined meeting place, a hidden spring marked by 3 distinctive pinnacle rocks. He had nearly reached the canyon floor when disaster struck. A loose stone gave way beneath his foot, sending him tumbling down the remaining distance. The fall itself wasn't fatal, but the sharp crack of breaking bone was unmistakable. Running Deer bit back a cry of pain as he assessed the damage. His lower leg had snapped, the bone visibly distorted beneath his skin. Movement became instantly impossible. Without creating a trail of blood any tracker could follow, the sound of his fall had alerted the soldiers. Their voices carried clearly as they redirected their search toward the canyon's far side. Running Deer knew he had moments at most before discovery. With grim determination, he dragged himself into a narrow crevice, using a knife to cut strips from his leather shirt. He bound the broken leg tightly, using a sturdy branch as a splint, then prepared to make his final stand. Better to die fighting than to be captured and used to track the others. When the first soldier appeared around the bend, Running Deer had a momentary advantage of surprise. He launched his remaining strength into a desperate attack, his knife finding its mark in the soldier's arm, but numbers quickly overwhelmed him. The brief, fierce struggle ended with Running Deer pinned. The ground, the barrel of a rifle, pressed against his temple. "This one's been leading us in circles," one soldier observed, "probably covering for others." "Take him back to the fort," the patrol leader ordered. "The agent will want to question him personally." As they bound his hands and fashioned a crude travois to transport him, Running Deer fixed his gaze on the distant blue smoke still visible against the darkening sky. Despite his capture, the primary mission had succeeded. Cloud Dancer remained free. The twins were heading toward Sanctuary, and additional cavalry resources would remain fixated on this area, far from Morning Star's actual route. For the first time since that desperate day at the trading post, Running Deer felt something like peace. His children would live free, even if he did not. 3 days after the scattered departures, Morning Star and Tall Pine reached the ancient cave dwellings with the twins. The natural shelters, carved into canyon walls by ancestors long ago, offered protection from both elements and observation. Springs within the caves provided fresh water, while nearby juniper groves concealed their presence from distant viewers. As other Apache families gradually arrived at this sanctuary, following different routes to avoid creating obvious trails, news spread through whispered conversations. Gray Wolf and the elders who had remained behind had been taken to the fort. Running Deer had been captured after leading soldiers on an extended chase. Cloud Dancer had successfully reached Stonewalker's group, where Swift Fox and Little Dove awaited her. Morning Star arranged the main cave as a communal gathering place, positioning a traditional peace pipe carved from sacred red stone and adorned with eagle feathers at its center. This symbolic object represented not just peace between enemies, but harmony within the community, a reminder of their need for unity in this crisis. On the fourth evening, as the displaced Apache shared a modest meal of gathered plants and small game, a lookout reported an approaching rider. Weapons were quickly readied, children hidden deeper in the caves, until the rider was identified, Lieutenant Barrett, alone and in civilian clothing. "I come under truce," he called from a respectful distance, clearly aware of the rifles aimed in his direction. "I seek only to talk." Stonewalker and 2 younger men escorted Barrett to the main cave, where Morning Star and other respected community members waited. The lieutenant removed his hat, taking in the gathered Apache and the ancient dwelling they had claimed. "Running Deer is alive," Barrett began, understanding their most immediate concern. "His leg is broken, but being treated. He told us nothing despite Blackwood's questioning." Relief passed visibly through the gathering at this news. "Why are you here?" Stonewalker asked directly. "Captain Wilson sends me with a proposal." Barrett glanced at the peace pipe. "May I?" After receiving permission, Barrett sat cross-legged near the symbolic pipe. Though no smoking ceremony was offered a sign that trust remained limited. "The reservation transfer has become complicated," Barrett explained. "Half your people vanished before the soldiers arrived. Blackwood is furious, demanding more troops to hunt you down. But Captain Wilson sees an opportunity for a different approach." Morning Star, the twins sleeping peacefully in their cradle boards beside her, studied Barrett carefully. "What approach?" "A compromise. Your people remain in this area under military supervision rather than relocation. In exchange, selected tribal members provide valuable services to the fort." "What services?" Stonewalker asked suspiciously. "Medical, primarily. The fort's doctor left for Tucson last month. Soldiers fall ill with fevers the Army medicine can't treat." Barrett looked directly at Morning Star. "Captain Wilson was impressed by reports of your healing skills during the recent sickness." The implications were clear. Morning Star's knowledge of traditional medicine, particularly her success treating the illness that had struck Apache children, had created unexpected leverage. "And the children?" she asked. "Blackwood's plans for them?" "Modified," Barrett replied carefully. "Those who remain with their families would receive periodic schooling at the fort rather than being sent east. Captain Wilson would personally guarantee no forcible separations." Cloud Dancer, who had arrived with Stonewalker's group the previous day, spoke from where she sat with her older children. "And Running Deer? Those already captured? Released to rejoin their families here, under the same arrangement." Barrett hesitated. "I won't pretend it's perfect freedom. There would be boundaries, restrictions, regular army presence. But your people would remain together on a portion of your traditional lands. A murmur passed through the gathered Apache. The offer fell far short of true justice, but represented a significant improvement over forced relocation and family separation. Morning Star lifted the peace pipe, not to smoke it, but to emphasize its symbolism. We will consider Captain Wilson's words. Return tomorrow for our answer. After Barrett departed, intense discussion continued late into the night. Some younger men argued for continued resistance, but those with children recognized the practical benefits of the compromise. We preserve our families, Cloud Dancer pointed out. Our children grow knowing the old ways, even with limitations. And running deer returns to us, White Feather added. All our people together. By dawn, consensus had emerged. They would accept Wilson's offer with specific conditions: guaranteed access to traditional hunting and gathering areas, protection from settlers encroaching on their reduced territory, and most importantly, assurance that Apache children would remain with their families. Morning Star crafted the response carefully, knowing that this agreement, however imperfect, might represent their best hope for keeping the community intact, for ensuring the twins and other children grew up knowing their heritage, their language, their identity as Apache. Spring brought gentle rains to the canyon, transforming the parched landscape with tentative green growth. The Apache community had settled into their new reality, a compromise between complete freedom and the devastating separation they had narrowly avoided. Captain Wilson had honored his agreement, establishing boundaries that allowed them to maintain many traditional practices while satisfying the territorial government's demand for supervision of the tribe. Running Deer's leg had healed, though he walked with a slight limp that would likely remain permanent. The physical reminder of his sacrifice had earned him a measure of respect among those who had once judged him harshly. Today, however, his thoughts were not on past actions, but on the ceremony about to take place. The twins, now nearly 6 months old and thriving, would receive their true names. Morning Star had prepared for this significant event by gathering the community in the central clearing between their dwellings. At her instruction, twin eagle feathers had been placed on a ceremonial blanket, symbolic items representing the special place these children had come to occupy in tribal consciousness. The matching feathers, found together after a spring storm, were considered a powerful sign from the Creator, a blessing upon these infants who had unwittingly become catalysts for their people's survival. As tradition dictated, both Morning Star and Cloud Dancer had roles in the naming ceremony. Their once complicated relationship now transformed into a partnership in raising the twins. The arrangement that had begun in desperate circumstances had evolved into something unprecedented but deeply functional. The children divided their time between both women's dwellings, receiving nourishment for both body and spirit from this expanded family structure. Running Deer watched with quiet pride as the ceremony began. Cloud Dancer held their daughter, while Morning Star carried their son, both infants alert and responsive to the drumming and singing that accompanied this important rite of passage. White Feather, as the eldest female healer, presided over the ceremony. These children came to us in the hardest of times, she proclaimed to the gathered community. Their journey began in hunger, but brought us to unity. Today we give them their true names, which they will carry into a future we have, preserved through courage and sacrifice. Following tradition, Cloud Dancer spoke first, officially naming her daughter. I name this child brings unity, she declared, her voice strong and clear. For she has joined families, healed divisions, and shown us that together we are stronger than apart. A murmur of approval passed through the gathering. The name was fitting, acknowledging not just the child's personal qualities, but her larger significance to the community. Morning Star then stepped forward with the boy. I name this child New Dawn, she announced. For he represents the beginning. That follows darkness, the promise that sustains us through longest night. As the newly named children were presented to the four directions, Running Deer felt an unexpected weight lifted from his heart. The desperate father who had once stood in the trading post with twins in his arms, shame burning in his chest, now witnessed his children being celebrated as symbols of renewal and hope. Captain Wilson had permitted several Apache families from Vaughn the reservation to attend this ceremony, including Gray Wolf and the elders who had sacrificed themselves in the initial confrontation. Their presence completed the circle, bringing together those who had scattered and those who had been captured. Gray Wolf approached Running Deer as the formal ceremony concluded and community members shared food and stories. "Your children have strong names," the chief observed. "Names that speak to what we have learned, that our strength lies not in separation, but in finding new ways to remain Apache together." Running Deer nodded, watching as Morning Star and Cloud Dancer moved among the community, each carrying one twin. Swift Knife, once his harshest critic, now conversed respectfully with Morning Star about the boy's progress. Stone Walker's grandchildren played nearby with Little Dove, while Swift Fox proudly explained to younger children how his siblings had special medicine from having two mothers. The arrangement that had once seemed unnatural had become a model, a demonstration that Apache traditions could adapt without breaking, could bend without losing their essential character. As evening approached, the families gathered on a plateau overlooking their canyon home. Lieutenant Barrett, who served as liaison between the fort and the Apache community, had discreetly absented himself from this private celebration. Understanding that some moments belonged solely to the tribe, Running Deer found himself standing between Morning Star and Cloud Dancer as they watched the sunset paint the canyon walls with golden light. Each woman held one twin, yet there was no division in how they stood together, a family reconfigured by circumstance, but strengthened through shared purpose. "They will know both worlds," Morning Star said softly, "but always remember who they are." "Apache children," Cloud Dancer agreed, "born in hardship, growing in strength." Running Deer placed one hand gently on each twin's head, feeling the soft pulse of life beneath his palms. "The children who were almost lost," he said, finding words for what they all felt, became the salvation of their people. Above them, stars began to appear in the deepening blue sky eternal, witnesses to the resilience of those who refused to surrender their most precious bonds, who found new paths forward when old ones were blocked, who transformed the most desperate of circumstances into unexpected harmony.